So I hit the live button. Usually I
Okay.
you know, we just kind of chat for a bit while people come and hang.
Do we have a link that I could put into my Facebook group?
Yeah. Let's see. Copy. Oh man, why did the thumbnail not work? It has a picture of the person I talked to yesterday. Let me fix that. Let's see. Desktop. Today. There we go. There he is. Alright, I'll put it in the chat
Great.
on here. So hopefully that link works and hopefully the thumbnail adjusted. Pop out chat. Yeah, the way I usually do these is, you know, we do them live just so people can ask questions and kind of be part of the experience, and then I put it on the Patreon, and then a couple weeks later it ends up going up as a finished episode. That way there's kind of like an exclusive aspect to actually being here live, you know. You get extra questions and stuff like that.
That makes sense. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's fun. I don't know if you ever do streams on your channel, but
you know, it's so funny, since I'm like such a crazy editor, I have not done any live streams because I'm a fucking control freak. The podcast I do for politics is like a 8-hour edit every day, or I should say 2 days a week. And I love that control of like getting everything really concise and everything, but I know I also have to let go of the control at some point and get into this.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little scary too. Like the first time I ever did a stream, I was kind of like nervous, you know, because it's like you have to kind of think about what you say more, just because internet is so crazy nowadays. I'm sure you realize that editing the podcast you do.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's times I'm like, yeah, you know, maybe since I'm the editor, I'm just gonna re-say that one time with a little more caution.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, the one host has a mouth on him that can get us sued into oblivion, which is why we also have to do that. So he's like the #1 enemy of Trump. So there's a lot of people looking for him to go down.
Yeah,
he's the head of that Lincoln Project thing. So it's rough.
Yeah, the political climate in the United States is just bonkers right now. There's just so, like, even from on both perspectives, it's like the amount of hatred is just kind of unimaginable.
Yeah, it's a dark time, and what I keep saying is, so this job keeps going if Trump's reelected, and it's over if Biden's elected, and I will never be so happy to be fired in my life. Like I pray for it at this point.
Oh man, that's funny.
Too much stress. I like talking about music way more.
Yeah. All right, cool. So looks like we got 16 people hanging out at the moment. I see we got KVBA in the chat. And actually, he already had a question. So before we do the introduction, that'll be like the start of the official stream and video. Let's just see what his question is. Maybe a bit off topic, but I was wondering, does the Spotify... Oh, he's asking a question about my course. If it works for YouTube, too. And no, I don't do any YouTube ads in that course. And actually, this chat might be relevant because we'll be talking about your opinion about Facebook ads at some point as some part of it. But either way... Oh, Josh Tice, what's up, man? How's it going? This is Casimir. Nice. All right. Cool. So, if you could, Jesse, let everyone know who you are, what you're all about, kind of some cool things about your past and all that.
Cool. So my name is Jesse Cannon. I am known when we're on the YouTube I do a channel called Musformation where I discuss creativity for musicians, but I also discuss how to go from 0 to 10,000 fans. I've mostly been in music, a record producer, mixer, and mastering engineer in the punk, emo, hard rock world. I wrote one of the most popular books on how you build a fan base called Get More Fans. I also wrote a book called Processing Creativity, and I've done a ton of podcasts about music over the years, and I'm a professional podcast producer, and I think that's most of my resume. I kind of forget all the things I do sometimes, but yeah, but like what I'm very passionate about talking about, I think what I'm most known for is I talk a lot about music marketing. I've worked in music marketing at majors and indie labels. throughout my life. I write lots of plans for DIY artists, and that's kind of the world I'm in the New York City indie label type thing.
Yeah.
So I believe that the music world gets better when we hear from musicians and there's a democratization of music. So I try to just get that stuff out, and plus, as much as I've resisted it in my life, it's just what I'm interested in, so I just keep talking about it.
Yeah, that's cool. And you know, for everyone who here that hasn't seen his channel, I did put a link in the description. Hopefully, it actually saved correctly. But it's Muse Formation, like MUS Formation. Yep. And if you like my channel, you love his channel. He doesn't have any like fluff or like inspiration-based marketing content. He's actually has like actionable stuff. So
when I say things like that, Andrew, I get accused of being malicious towards other people.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think there's a place for that kind of stuff, but usually people that watch my channel appreciate the kind of like just like raw exposure of data and opinions, you know. And so I think you're kind of in that same boat. Like you're just like
like I said, the way we started talking is I feel like somebody put a comment on one of my videos as if it was going to bait me to say something bad, and I'm like, I actually like Andrew's channel, and I subscribe to every one of the channels, and you know, yours is one that I'm like, oh, this is a person who's just doing their best to honestly find answers and find things out, whereas a lot of people I think are thinking they're going to be big time influencers and grift people for a lot of shit that I find really reprehensible.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the whole concept between me and my music marketing videos. Is it's me sharing what I'm doing and what's working, and also what's not working, and then talking to people who are experts in things that I'm not in. And so, actually, I mean, one thing that might be a cool transition is, you know, you mentioned you had a couple different areas of experience working at labels, and I think you dropped like Warner at one point in one of your videos.
So until COVID, for 2.5 years before that, I was at Warner Music Group doing podcast production and marketing, where it was a very interesting thing. So Warner had two initiatives for us, which is one, they wanted to actually show the DNA of what goes into it. So I did this series called Inside the Album, where I would do the most, no label ever let somebody, like, we've all seen those classic albums, VH1 documentaries. This was like actually like letting me go in and ask like hard hitting questions about how artists are actually shaped. And you know, obviously they wanted this to be beneficial to the artist, but I got full editorial control, and I got to talk a lot about the actual creative process and like show the realistic things like that. You know, I'm somebody who came from punk rock, major label skepticism my whole life. Like I joked when I took that job that my 19-year-old self would kick my ass for taking a job at a major label. It was so disgusted with myself. But what I learned was, yeah, there's a lot of shaping of the artist going, but also there was a lot of exaggerations of what people would always tell me was happening. And so I got to do these couple different podcasts where we really, really got into it. And I also got to sit in marketing meetings and see how we really build artists. But the most interesting thing, which shapes a lot of my YouTube channel, is I also was basically, as artists were getting signed a lot of time, I was like doing initial interviews with them. I was learning how they got there. And that always, to me, and it's something I've been doing, and I didn't realize I'd been doing it for the last 10 years, is like all the interviews I've been doing on podcasts, or I used to have, Muse Formation comes from a blog I had where I was one of the first blogs that was about DIY musicians 10 years ago, is I was learning how artists really actually build them up, because I think there's just so many lies out there, and there's so many people, you know, there's like these like indie survival guide type books that would just be total lies to people and just useless information. So I've kind of dedicated myself to find that out. And this last thing that I did when I was at Atlantic really was like a whole new world of learning for me, even though I've been doing this since 1999.
Wow. So in terms of, I mean, this probably varies a ton, but when, let's say, I mean, you might not know the exact answer to this, but, you know, Warner, when you saw a new artist come in, what's some of the steps that Warner would take to kind of, you know, break that artist if they already weren't broken? Like, what are the main kind of like two, three, four things they would focus on?
So I just wrote a video on this that's in the pipeline. So this is very easy for me to do.
Good.
So a lot of what one thing you do is like, so let's say this is the, I think this will be the most helpful to say. Let's say it's an artist, which is a very common scenario. They went into the studio and they sang on a song that did well with a producer group, let's call it in the EDM world. So like a Cash or whoever. And what they would then do is they go, okay, well, you got to start finding who you are. So what do you do to find out who you are? You write with a ton of songwriters and producers. So they're going to throw you in the studio with everyone in the book and lots of really talented people. And then you're going to start discovering who you are. And what you see over and over again is eventually what happens is you find that like, ooh, that's what works for their voice. That's what works for their style. And then that becomes the album style. Like, you know, you can literally watch it traced a lot of the time that you're like, you'll see the singles they're dropping. Because we have to also remember, you know, these artists are just like DIY artists. Warner's doing the same thing I tell everybody to do, which is release a ton of singles before you ever put out an LP. Like you look at Cardi B, you know, she had out a bajillion songs before that LP.
Right.
And when I saw how many songs they had her write before that LP, it was like 100 fucking songs.
Wow, really? So they write like 10x more songs than they need or something?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, I just made a video too about Rick Rubin about how he shapes albums, and even when he gets in with a band, he makes them write 2.5 albums for every album they release.
Wow.
And we've one on the cutting room floor that never gets recorded, and then another half album that they record, and that's the bonus tracks. And that really is the thing. Now, a lot of people that's really discouraging, but that really is how you shape it. Now, let's also go backwards a little because I don't want to get too crazy with the Cardi thing, is that some of the smaller artists are not going to write 100 songs. Cardi was obviously getting amazing traction, so they're putting investment. But that's another thing I learned there, which is that they were watching what worked. Like, you know, in 2.5 years, there's a very funny thing you can do with every major label, which is you can watch their roster expand and contract if you just do a screenshot on it. About January 7th, 8th-ish, let's call it, of each year. If you just screenshot that, the purge usually happens right before the new year, and you see a whole lot of artists who aren't going to be on that roster anymore. And you'd be shocked how many of those artists don't get a further investment because they gave them a video, they gave them a bunch of production, and then it didn't work out. I mean, one of the things I also always tell people, because I work with a lot of artists who've been signed to a major label, is the majority of the big artists you see in the world were signed to a different major label before the one that it hits with. That's one of the most consistent stories I see on a regular basis. But to get back to your question, and feel free to keep me on course because
it's good to hear all this kind of like side commentary on how, you know, stuff at Label works. I'm sure everyone here, and, you know, feel free everyone in the chat to let me know. I'm sure you're all interested in that kind of stuff because I sure as hell am. So, you know, feel free to go off in as many tangents as you want.
So I think one of the most interesting things, and this informs a lot of what we'll get into about Facebook ads too, is that what you'd see is that they then find a song. So the A&R has worked with the artist to develop a good song, and they're like, okay, it is now time to invest in pushing this song to the world. So we're now going to have our playlist people, get you a music video director, and we're going to put some content out into the world, and we're going to start trying to see you. They then give you, so you then move from, this was one of the most interesting things I learned too, is so the A&R is only working on the songs with you and the initial scouting of finding you. But then you go to a product manager who is really a marketing person. And that person is then going to take you and they're going to figure out some things to do. But mostly when you're a small artist, they're going to just make a music video. Maybe they're going to think about how you go to radio. They're going to do a lot of rounds. Now, one of the things we would do with the podcast is like they'd have me make a podcast that kind of told who an artist was very fast. So they could actually circulate that to booking agents and lawyers and other team members to try to get people excited about that artist as they tell that story.
Yeah.
And you know, we can get into how important the story is at a different thing, but they'd tell the story. And then if that got traction, then maybe they'd start investing in other things. But until a song got traction, you're probably just getting that video and a little bit of playlist pushing and things like that. But you're getting the bare minimum marketing until they see that this is somebody worth throwing way more money on, because you have what I like to call a susceptible song where lots of people hear it and they're susceptible to liking it.
Okay, so that's all very interesting. It's you know, it's, you know, that kind of information is very rare to hear unless you like know someone at a label, and I guess now I do know someone who used to work at a label. um,
Yeah, and I'm also lucky my girlfriend's been in this business and worked with some of the hugest, most interesting. She works with much more left field artists. Like she was at Warp forever, so she's working with Aphex Twin, Flying Lotus, all these
yeah.
really interesting artists. And you see a very similar thing there too. Is the pop thing is not much different from the weirdest artists and how they get big.
Yeah, so for you mentioned that the artists they'll get funded for a video and then like might get some playlist promotion. Do big labels do they use places like Playlist Push and Submit Hub, or do they go even further and use like the sketchy ass ones that like?
No. So here's an interesting thing. So what my girlfriend actually does is she works at a distributor who's like, let's call it all the biggest indie labels are on this distributor. There's about 4 distributors that handle every large indie that's not a major. So she works at the one that I would say, like, if you're in indie rock, that's the biggest one. And she pitches for placements at Apple, at the streaming services. So the major labels have direct pitches and direct lines to people. And let's also say this, the A&R people usually are going out to drinks with the person who runs the big Rap Caviar and things like that. And I will tell you that firsthand. I know it because what my girlfriend has to do for extracurricular activity is she wines and dines the Apple Music rep to get better placements, and we go out and we pay for her drinks. And that is the reality of what you do deal with in this, is that, so like what I tell everybody is like, obviously most DIY musicians are on a TuneCore, a DistroKid, a CD Baby. I hope you're not on CD Baby personally, but that's a different story. But they're not going to pitch anything for you. So then you need those other things. You need to either be doing the DIY methods using Playlist Supply and researching playlists yourself and doing pitches, or you need, and obviously using the Spotify playlist tool. But what you then do is when you have some traction, let's say you have a song with 500,000 streams, is you can try to get on an AWOL or a STEM or Believe, whoever, the bigger music distributors that handle just artists that are not on labels, and then you can have somebody on your side who's actually going to pitch you for playlist things, and then get on that. And let's say this: yes, there's a lot of hope. I think there's more hope for DIY artists than ever, because Spotify really does do a lot of DIY artists huge favors, especially in certain genres, with getting them on big playlists. But there is an unfair advantage that I watch when we're out buying dinner for people and drinks for people.
Yeah. And I talked to someone who said that he had like a contact that managed like a couple specific playlists at Spotify, and because he had that relationship, he was able to like leverage getting his songs there more often.
That's true.
And then he mentioned at some point Spotify had some kind of purge where they like were trying to make it a little more objective, or maybe you might say make it a little more exclusive to the majors. Might be one way to look at it, but.
And that is actually a thing I talk about a lot that is very disturbing, is like we had this really good period a few years ago where there was a really good democratization, but now what you're seeing is the overdue influence of the major labels and the large indies is just shrinking down so much of it. It's like a very funny thing you can even see is when you click the new release tab on Spotify, it's like actually comical how you can go to the trending charts and not see any of the artists that are doing really well that have no label affiliation in that. I mean, my girlfriend will always laugh. I'll go on, I'm really into like the genre hyperpop. So like I'll click that playlist on Spotify. I'll be like, oh wow, that 15-year-old Glaive I really like. And she's like, oh, well, you must have a distributor now. Because no one's getting that picture without a distributor. I don't care how well that 15-year-old's doing.
Yeah. So for an indie artist, that doesn't want to even sign to an indie label, they don't want to sign to a large label either. What would be your main, like, outside of making great music, making great social media content, engaging their fan base, like all the stuff that's kind of assumed before you even get into marketing? What would you tell someone, like, their path forward if all these playlist opportunities are kind of just out of their reach? What would your advice be?
I don't want to characterize it as out of reach, because that's in reach for indie artists. Like, the guy I'm interviewing tonight has huge success with that. So I don't want to say that, but maybe let's characterize it as, and I'm sorry, like, I'm very big on the nuance of this stuff. So I want to not sound like I'm saying something I'm not saying. What I would say is this is I'm very big in, and this is why I don't like the Facebook ad thing, which I'm sure we'll get into, is I'm very big into community.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what I would say is like I got to talk to all these artists, and it's a consistent thing I've done for a decade is I've gotten to talk to artists about how they ascended upwards, and that is through community. And now what I mean by that, since it's a very vague term, is this: is the artists who do well have a consistent thing of that they're one, just like we were talking about what the major label does, is they're writing with tons of other people. Now that could be genre specific. If you're in a metal band, you're not going around writing with other metal bands.
Right.
If you're in EDM or a pop artist, that is the name of the fucking game. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember when the Chainsmokers 7 years ago were just a group who would find everybody on the hype machine and they'd be like, hey, do you want to do a song together? And it finally worked for them after they did 1,000,000 fucking songs and they became the world's most annoying band. But what I'm saying here though is you're one, reaching out to people. Now two, let's say you're a rock band. What you're reaching out to people is maybe you're going to tour together, you're going to play shows, you're going to trade shows, you're going to put each other in the featured artists. You may do, like, one of the things I tell everybody to do is go on Instagram Live with somebody who's similar to you and just talk for an hour and play each other's songs to the audience, and you will trade fan bases. And that community stuff is what I see really grows. Now then it goes even further, is that those bonds you make with people in the community and by doing things right now, other part of the community is message boards. I saw, for example, you just put up a message board.
Oh yeah.
I have one on Facebook group. One of the weirdest things that people overlook is like the origin story of so many huge artists is I met that person in a message board and we became good friends, and then the one got popular first and then they brought the other one along. And back in the day, I'd think of this as My Chemical Romance went on tour with the Used when the Used were bigger than them. Then about 2 years later,
they're way
My
bigger.
Chemical Romance was way bigger, and they took the Used on tour, and vice versa. And it keeps going back and forth, and then they're doing a reunion tour together, and it's just like, these relationships keep re-upping things, and they keep giving opportunities. So becoming friends with the people who are similar to you, that are exciting to you, and like doing that research of going through SoundCloud tags, going through Bandcamp tags, and finding who are the people you vibe with and making relationships with them is like, literally, people underestimate it, but it is everything. And it's also, I think so I've managed one of the things I forgot in my bios, I managed a bunch of successful punk bands. So people would be like, oh, well, how'd you do that? I'm like, yes, we made a lot of smart decisions, but the best trait of all those bands, and many of the bands I've worked with that have been successful, is they make friends really well. And it's not an unnatural thing, it's not networking, it's that they're just genuinely interested in talking to people, and they're good at hanging with people, and they've extended themselves, and they really enjoy it, and that's what keeps them on the road and keeps them doing cool things with other people.
Yeah, and I talked to someone last night. I don't know if you saw that live stream, but it was with someone named Zan Griffin, and he's built himself up to like, right now he has like 120,000 monthly listeners, and he peak was like 500,000 monthly listeners on Spotify alone, and 100% organic, basically. Like, he did a bunch of remixes, he networked the hell out. Like, he started making music when he was 9, and he's only 20 now.
Oh wow.
And he just said, like, he had all this free time, so he would just email everyone, like hundreds of people a day, and build relationships and actually, like, do favors for people all the time. And to the point where when he needed to secure some kind of, unique remix or get permissions for something or work with someone, it was just, it fell in place because everyone appreciated the community, that he, like, input into the community. And so it's nice to bring that up because it resonates a lot with the message that he was saying as well.
Yeah, and and to that point, like, remix is a perfect thing for people. And like, it's like the funniest thing that I keep finding is like, people will be like, well, I'm not a EDM artist, I can't do a remix. I'm like, well, let's actually think about this. Both Adele and Gautier credit their early success to the fact that those vocals for all the songs that we think of as their sound were actually in 1 million remixes, and that's how those songs got broke. Both those artists had those songs out for 9 months, and then they were being put on the dance floor, and then people would listen to the original and get converted, and that helped bring everything up. Remixing, and what I also call, like, recontextualization, one of the funniest things I saw too at Atlantic would be that an artist would release a song and then they'd want to keep the momentum going. And they'd be like, okay, let's do a stripped down version. Okay, let's do a version with strings.
Yeah.
And then that song would boost up the original version or become the popular version.
Yeah.
Of the
Yeah,
song.
it's true, because like in addition to an EDM artist like doing remixes of other people's stuff, you know, you do see artists who wouldn't do like their own remixes, like either hiring or finding other people to do remixes for them, and then they credit them on that release as they're the remixer. And you know, either some artists will do a contest, like I know Illenium does like remix contests, and a lot of big EDM artists will let other people remix their songs. But yeah, you always see these other versions, and they're probably just hired out or, you know, done for free, and sometimes they do very well.
And that is the thing, is like that is so much of the game to me, is finding people vibe with. And you know, like the best thing too about remixes and collaborations and features is it's long lasting cross promotion. You know, like one of my friends, she was talking about that, like this producer she worked with just got big, and now all of a sudden she's seeing one of her songs is doing really well, but then that's trickling down to about 10% of those people start listening to the rest of her stuff because she has a great voice.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's go to the spicy part of this chat. So Jesse has a video on his channel, actually a few, talking about his general dislike of using Facebook ads to promote music. And you know, someone actually originally like recommended I hit you up like a few months ago, like they were like a fan of yours, and I like checked out your website and then forgot to email you, and then I was just like, your video got recommended to me one day, and I watched it, and then I scrolled down the comments, and I see someone like writes a comment like, Andrew Southworth is the go to Facebook ads, and I was like, yeah. And then I you know, I see you're in there, and then you know, I send you a message in there, and here we are. And so you bring up a lot of good points in that video, and surprisingly I agreed with most of the things you said, and there were some things that even the disagreement was more subtle than like a hard disagreement.
Yes.
So I guess I'll start with how like a lot of the things that I recommend people do before they get into Facebook ads, and then you can kind of frame your perspective on it, and that way we can kind of see where the differences are. So, you know, this probably gets lost for, you know, all the people in the chat that watch my videos. I do a lot of stuff about Facebook ads, but I actually have videos talking about social media strategies and other, like how releasing singles versus albums. The biggest assumption before you get into any kind of paid marketing or even marketing in general for me is that I think your music should be at least 80% as good as anything that's on the radio if you're going to promote it at all. And I also think it's good for people to get into doing kind of organic marketing, like social media strategies around every song, you know, hitting people up, trying to build relationships. You know, one reason for that is so you can figure out what your audience is and kind of establish your sound before you spend money. Because if you know, for one, if you only have one song out and you start spending money in ads, it might work out well if your song's great, but if you only have one song, like the person's going to get there, they're going to see one song, there's not going to be enough material for them to stick. And so you don't have that stickiness factor. And same with Instagram. If you have like 3 posts and you send someone to your Instagram, like, why would they follow you? You don't put any content out. So those are all the kind of things that you know, I don't mention them in every video, but I think it's good for artists to have before they get into not just Facebook ads, but like Submit Hub or like even just emailing people, because your stickiness factor is going to be bad. And so I guess for you, Jesse, I don't know if what is your perspective on the Facebook ads for everyone watching, and how does it contrast to anything part of that?
Well, everything you said I was pretty much in agreement with. I guess what I'll double down on is that I tend to really find that specifically that the artists who have not really made like what I call is enough material to build a relationship with. So what I mean by that is I talk a lot about building up the momentum to your great songs. So like, you know, obviously we want to be writing our best songs over and over and over again, but you know, we also know the reality that, you know, maybe the third
some songs,
a little bit of a dud.
Songs flop. It happens all the time.
And you know, it's also so subjective. Like, you know, it's funny. Like, I listened to a bunch of your music and leading up to this, and there's certain songs I'm like, damn, this slaps, and then there's certain songs I'm like, Yeah, that's not as good as the other one that I thought slaps.
Yeah, and I bet
And
those are probably the ones that you like more than others, were probably the ones that naturally like ended up doing way better in my ads and then the algorithmic playlist. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
I saw it correspond because I did the experiment while watching your video where you talked about this. So I
yeah,
wanted to be very well homeworked on this. So anyway, what I see is that you need to have enough material to build a relationship with for when you get attention. So what we used to talk about before everybody was talking about Facebook ads, since I should also say the background is like a lot of my issue is not that I don't think Facebook ads can't work. I just think that they work so rarely compared to how many of the grifters on the internet are selling them. There's just and I should say, when you saw that comment, I said I liked your work a lot because I think you're very honest about what the results are. I like that you publish real numbers, not this bullshit graph that these fucking assholes put on Facebook. Like, I'm gonna make you, dude. Here's a graph.
You got 2 million impressions, and then you realize impressions
yeah.
mean absolutely nothing. It's yeah. Well,
so yeah, I mean, so here's my point. You need to have all this material that can build a relationship with. So a great example is like, I often find a lot of the music I listen to on TikTok, and then I go to Spotify after I hear a song that I like the hook on TikTok. And some people I get there and I'm like, oh, there's nothing to build a relationship here. I put it on the playlist and I probably don't think about them again. Or if they really put an impression on me, I may be hitting shuffle on that playlist and go, oh, I wonder what that group is up to if they put out anything new. But they didn't have anything to build a relationship. Now, whereas like there's these two artists I'm really into now, Alden and Glaive. I found them through TikTok. I go there and I'm like, oh, they have 7 songs. And I'm just listening, it's been over 30 days that I am just on this playlist I have of the two of them on repeat all the time while I'm writing. And that was enough to build a relationship. So the biggest problem that you were outlining is that people get to your profile and there's nothing to build a relationship with. They're probably going to forget you. They're not enough good material to then do what we've all done when we love a group, which is build a relationship and want to keep knowing about them, want to keep staying in touch and thinking about what they're doing. Like, the funniest thing with music is you have this thing that they emotionally conflict with you, and then you want to know more of their story, you want to know all more of these things. One song, that's going to be a far stretch. So yes, there's that, and then there's a lack of the thing I talked about before, susceptibility. That most of the songs, even if somebody liked it, now I know one of the things you talk about very well, and I think communicate really well, is that you need to know the similar artists that are going to get you, like, being broad and just doing the biggest acts in a certain genre is not going to do it. You need to go into what I like to call micro genres of finding who are the smallest groups that people are identifying with. And then the biggest problem with that becomes that Facebook doesn't allow you to identify lots of small.
Right, yeah. That's a huge problem I have. Like, even like one song I did, I modeled the song off of Illenium. I don't know if you know Illenium.
I do. Yeah.
So I'm a huge fan of his music, and I kind of close to that style. So I'm like, I'm gonna make this as marketable to his audience as possible. But he's not targetable on Facebook ads, despite being a gigantic international superstar artist. And a lot of hip hop artists have this problem too when they're running ads. Is that a lot of these hip hop artists are new, or they have like sketchy affiliations, like lots of drug references, so Facebook doesn't include them, and they have trouble too.
Yes. And then the other problem being that a lot of people do not direct people to like their Facebook page like they did 10 years ago, is that they're, wide variety of genres. When I sit in meetings with people, it's like, yeah, we don't want to mention your Facebook page because we want them to follow you on Instagram and Spotify, and they're not going to do 3 things.
Yeah, that whole like multiple ass thing, and you end up getting 0.
Yeah. yes, that is correct. And so like that makes that part really tough, is that you can do that. And then something I know you've gotten into in your videos is that then you can really fuck up your algorithm, because you're bringing people who are not susceptible to your music in, and Spotify is going to look at you and say, why do we promote this person? Everybody who hears it thinks it's trash. Right. They don't come back and listen again. They don't do the thing. Whereas that community thing I talked about, that finds the people who are going to do it. You become similar, you're reaching out to the similar artists on your Spotify page, you're talking to them, you're getting recommendations that are organic, and you're finding the blogs and the message boards they're on. That gets you a reinforcement structure that builds what I talk about as momentum in the right way.
So it sounds like a lot of your problem with Facebook ads isn't necessarily that. It sounds like it's more like on user error than anything. Like people are using their ads. They're using ads when they shouldn't be, or if they're using them, they're using them incorrectly, or they don't realize they're using them incorrectly and they keep spending money that they might not be doing them enough good, right?
Yeah, like one of the things I talk about is like a 4x occurrence or a 4x phenomenon. So like, let's say you have a song that does 4 times better. Now, granted, 4 times better when you've only had 1,000 streams, it's 4,000 doesn't really tell you something. But what I say is then pour more fire on it. So the big thing is, so like, let's say we check the boxes. You have enough good material to build a relationship with. You also have some like what we like to call social proof. Now, I don't always love this term because apparently it's from that book, The Game, about how guys pick up girls, and that's not so fun. But social proof does have a interesting thing to it, which is that. So, for example, I did another podcast after that Facebook video I made with my friend Matt Bacon. Matt does tons of marketing for metal, is a really, really smart guy on marketing, and so Matt talks about how like the label thing works really well because the label is a social proof. People are like, oh, I know that label, I like other things, so the ads are going to actually do way better compared to a DIY artist because you have the signatures. So what I say a lot of the time is, so let's say you've gotten a good social proof in that you got a review from the magazine everybody knows, or an artist has said something nice about you, or you're touring with this artist. If you have good cosigns, the ads can be very effective because that is what advertising works. One of the main ways I used to break groups about 10 years ago is that since when you go on tour, you could always send posters to every venue. So we would just put every cosign on the poster possible because then it's like, oh, well, I should know about who this is. And that did worlds of good for us. And that advertising principle works just as well on Facebook ads.
So it's almost like that effect when you see a Burger King ad and there's like a football player in it, right? Like it's kind of like a social proofing. Yeah.
Yes, same principle. But so the point being, most people do not have these things going. So they're just going to give Mark Zuckerberg, who's a horrible force in this world, more money and burn their own money when they could be, in my eyes, spending that money better by. So a lot of my thing I talk about is the building relationships. So what builds relationships? Music videos and producing YouTube content, just as you're doing around your music, builds relationships with it. People want to know more. People want to go deeper. And really, I made a whole video on this, is that like you can see some artists who this like ignites their career in that they know how to talk to people, they know how to express their vulnerability. There's this artist I work with named Cave Town who has, I think, 3 million subs on YouTube, and he has massive artist, is now on a major label now, but he is aromantic and he talks about that. He's incredibly good about talking about the gear he uses to record. He's just a great communicator, and he's making great music. But that other side to it is that because he's able to find a connection with his audience and something else, it pours gasoline on the fire he's already created.
Yeah. So on just to kind of I guess going the devil's advocate to what you're saying.
Yes, please do.
How would you explain, like, for me, like using Facebook ads, the fantastic results that I get and share, and then also like a lot of people who do the same thing I'm doing for my videos or for my course, for my consulting, and then not just on my side, but people that like Indepreneur. I'm sure you know Indepreneur.
I do.
There's a lot of people in their group too that get really good results. Now they tend to focus more on merch, and so it's a kind of different avenue.
Yes.
But I hear, like, it's not just myself. A lot of people just doing what I do, and it doesn't work for everyone. Like, there's definitely people who struggle, but for a lot of people, it just works great. So how would you explain that?
So what I would say is the great is a measured success metric. So what we're saying is, like, when I'm normally discussing this, is I'm discussing how you ascend to be a person who has a sustainable, you can go to every town and play to 500 people dash you have 1 million monthly listeners that is sustainable.
Okay.
So because here would be my thing. What I liked so much about you, and I should also pay you the great compliment, is when I first watched your videos, I was like, oh no, not fucking again. And then I saw a very honest voice who's showing actual numbers. So here's the thing: we all aspire, at least most of us, to have a high metric. The problem is that what I'm railing against is that these Spotify, Facebook ad con artists all tell you is you're going to have a million plays, you're going to have a million monthly listeners. It's sustainable. It's going to go forever. Yes, you're making good traction. You know, one of your last videos, you talked about the thing of like, hey, this is setting up the next single for success. I am all about that. I am not about the expectation that
Yeah,
the
you're going to
Facebook
become a
ad is,
superstar, and you're going to be
yeah,
on the
that
radio, and
yeah, everybody's selling that this is going to be the thing that breaks you. It's not the thing that breaks anybody. It's no one's origin story. Yes, somebody could get lucky and the right person sees that ad, but what I would also argue with that every music marketer talks about is that Facebook ads don't get you to the right people for things. They're usually the lowest bar fan that doesn't, like, one of the problems you talk about all the time is that the people don't stick around and keep doing things. So it's very rare that you get good fans because most of the good fans are skeptical and they have enough recommendations from trusted sources that they're never going to click an ad. They're only going to be like, okay, I trust this person to tell me what's good. I listen to Zane Lowe or I watch this playlist. They trust different things. So, and then as well in the community, most of those message boards are filled with people who are actually doing things in that can get you there. They're the intern at the record label you want to be on. They're the promoter in that city that may book you. They're the right people. So when you focus on the community, now the other reason I don't like the Facebook ads is everything we do, we put some level of trust that this might be hoping. And then we're saying, okay, the problem is solved. Like there's actually this funny thing. There's the former record producer, Daniel Levitin. He produced the famous song Don't Fear the Reaper. He then became a neuroscientist because he's a smart enough guy to get out of record production. Wrote this book called The Organized Mind, and where he talks about is that our brains, when we think a problem solved, we're like good, but then we experience massive disappointment when we trust things that don't solve a problem. So one of the things I see over and over again is that people get their hopes up too high about the results of the Facebook ad, and then they're crushed and debilitated and don't want to promote. Then they go through one of those 3-month lags where they don't do anything and they don't do the thing which I talk about all the time, which is consistent, sustained promotion. And that's a whole nother thing of how Facebook ads would work better for you and some of what you've talked about. And so my thing is it's a false bill of hope for so many people. So it's not that I don't think you can get results, but I don't think the results are always the best allocation when I think you can build relationships better by putting that money into a video that tells a story about you that could be building a relationship. I think you could be taking your time to put into community. I think that there's just better ways to allocate the resources you have at your disposal is the way I would put it.
So for someone making a video, you know, let's say they weren't going to go with Facebook ads and they were going to make a video, and I mean the community building stuff is, I guess that's more of an organic and free method, but how would they get that video out there in the first place? Well, you know, if they go and let's say they pay, you know, even a cheap rate to get like $500 to get a video, which would be pretty cheap. I mean, I guess they could do it themselves too.
Yes, that's yeah.
But
there's great videos being made for under 500, but so let's call it. I see indie bands get great videos for 1 to 3K very regularly. Like that's not a exception to the rule. That is part of the rule. I'd say it's not the greatest part of the rule, but it's a part of the rule.
Yeah. So like once they have that, you know, what's the next step, and how can they actually utilize it?
So part of the community thing is then you're being known on message boards. You're making the right people. They're helping pick you up. But as well, you know, there is the thing of, you know, my friend Finn McKenty, who is one of the smartest marketers I know. He talks a lot about the Instagram hashtag marketing. I don't know if you've seen that video, Andrew, but if you haven't, I'll put it in the chat for your audience to see it. It's one of the best videos on marketing you can watch. I'll send it to you after we're done.
Yeah.
Finn is fucking brilliant, and he runs a like massive channel called the Punk Rock MBA. But so you're doing all the marketing things that we all talk about with social media. You're talking to your community more. And there is like small best practices you can do on YouTube, but yes, you're hoping for algorithmic success. So one of the things I talk about is specifically what I also think is interesting is when you know your community and then you know your audiences. One of the things you talk about a lot is that then you know how to pitch the Spotify playlist tool inside Spotify better. You know what to write in the pitch better. You know the things, and then those pitches become more successful. One of the things I've seen in my own Facebook forum is that you're able to, we're seeing people get better at these pitches and they're getting better things, placements in the playlists and everything. And all of that is what doubles down it. Now, I totally get the urge to want to buy the ads, but especially during COVID, there's not really a lot of things we can do. No one's going on tour. No one's doing the things.
Yeah.
But what I would argue is what I think goes way further is telling a really good story around your music and thinking about how you tell that story for weeks on end and how you do that. You know, one of the things I talk so much about is like, so I talk about this algorithm. I see that there's a couple different legs to music promotion. One of them is appealing to the algorithm, and then another is amplifying your message. So with the amplifying your messages part, you're going to plan over 8 weeks. I tell everybody you should push a song for 8 weeks. If the song is going astronomically well, you may make that a little longer and delay the next single. The thing big labels do all the time. You know, I talk often a lot, even like a group like Brockhampton. Brockhampton will promote a song for 6 to 9 months when they know it's the right song. And they'll make 4 videos and 4 versions for it. And they really go in. But so the point being, so I like to make a single screen video, a lyric video dash a visualizer, a music video, and then an alternate version. As for every song, I'm going to go hard on promoting. And then you're going to have to find ways to take pictures from the music video, talk about the song's lyrics, show a behind the scenes video, do all the things and keep talking to all the different things that make sense for you and what your social media personality is, so that that gives visibility. And then you keep building momentum, because none of this is built in a day. And I think that's the biggest thing. You know, one of the things I've been shouting forever is every one of your favorite bands had a terrible first release day, and then they pushed for 9 months. Every one of them. No one had a good release day on their early songs.
See, everything you're saying, like, I agree with. The only thing I would say is, like, if you're gonna make this awesome story and build this community and make this dope video, you know, if you do the Facebook ads the right way and your music's solid enough, I don't think it can hurt, unless, you know, you're doing it wrong, you're not ready. But at the same, like, if someone wasn't ready to do ads, I don't know if I'd tell them to go spend like $1 or $2 grand in a music video either.
Well, so here's an interesting thing why I don't know if I agree with that part of it. Is what you see with that is a lot of these artists do very well with, that is their origin story. And like a lot of what I focus on is the actionable origin stories. What you do see over and over again is this artist made a compelling video and they got it around their community and they did it. What I don't hear in the origin story all the time is the Facebook ads got them their early audience and it did it. And that's why I do focus on that. Now, I do agree with you that, like, so I was talking, I got a little diverted about these like 4 times events. Let's say you got 40,000 first streams and you had 10,000 the last one. I don't think it's a bad idea to take what you spent on some of that video, like 1/3 of that budget is a very common occurrence for smart marketers in anything related to content, is to take about 1/3 of the production budget and throw it as outreach. Outreach can be Facebook ads. For some people, it may be even smarter to do, you know, if you were a prog rock band, I would turn to you first thing in that meeting and say, go do Reddit ads right now. That works in your genre.
For prog rock. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, they're fucking nerds. They're fucking nerds. They're all fucking literal cave-dwelling nerds. We're sitting on message boards going, "Oh, I don't like the pentatonic scale and the third measure." Oh.
And I think we're allowed to say that because I'm a huge prog metal fan, and I think you are too, right?
As am I. I've worked a lot of prog rock, so I know this well.
For all of you in the chat, before you get sad about it, we're also fans.
yes. We're demeaning ourselves, and that's when it's always okay.
Yeah, and I see some stuff in the chat. So there's people who don't agree with you, which is cool. And there's people who agree with a lot of what you're saying, and some, and you know, just to kind of let everyone in the chat know, like, we agree on a lot,
Yeah.
and I think, you know, at the end of the day, there's a million approaches to doing all this stuff, and things don't always work for everyone. Um,
And we should also say, you know, I think one of the dumbest things, while I'm talking a lot about more origin stories,
yeah,
everybody who imitates big artists isn't always doing the best thing for themselves. Paving
yeah,
your own path is a thing that actually big artists do all the time, is they find a new
yeah.
path and a new way. What I like to call even exploits is finding what's the new thing that's working really, really, really well, that no one's gotten hip to. There's been all sorts
Mm.
of things like that through the past.
I mean,
You
like
know,
the
last
whole
episode.
TikTok thing is completely
Oh
new,
yeah.
and so many artists are blowing up on it. And
Oh yeah.
uh, you know, there's I just blanked out on what I was gonna say. Oh, so the person I talked to yesterday, again, one of his strategies was, you know, he was more obsessed with quality than quantity, even though nowadays it's like you kind of got to crank out music. But you know, obviously it has to be good, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he kind of went the approach of like, I'm just gonna perfect this damn album that I've been wanting to do my whole life. And
Mm-hmm.
then he made this Zodiac album where he dropped a song in every day of the first Zodiac and just like didn't tell anyone. And so it created
Huh.
this weird like talk between his community of like, why is this one called like Capricorn? This one's like Scorpio. You know, and people started
Uh-huh.
putting together, oh, he's doing like a Zodiac thing. And then he just like keeps dropping this and it forms into this big album. And it started all this hype. And so that's kind of like a unique example too. And
It's story, and you know, to get into the story thing is like, why do stories work is something people are really skeptical about all the time. But then you think about what a story is. You're driving with your friend to the diner, and they're like, "Oh, this person did this," and then by the third, you may have listened to that artist once. Like, you know, my favorite group is the 1975. I had a friend tell me about the 1975 four times. I'm like, shut the fuck up about that lame group. And then finally I hit play again because I want to bond with my friend, and I listen, and then it hits. And then they are
yeah,
a band that I've spent, you know, probably $400 to $500 supporting now, and tell everybody about, gotten them tons more fans, just
that's
like
like
their
me
millions
and
of fans.
Tool. I never
Oh
liked
yeah.
Tool. And then one day it just like clicked. And now they've been one of my
Yeah.
favorite bands for like a decade. So,
And that, but that is how the story is told, is that you, when you do things that I call are eventful, that you're able to say, hey, did you look at this thing? Fans talk about it like, oh wow, did you see this latest video? Did you do the thing? When you do eventful things, it
yeah.
converts people over time, and that's why that stuff is important. As much as we can sometimes uh look at that stuff and go, ah, what the fuck, I'm not doing that. It's like, that's where it's made. And honestly,
Story is like, from every person I've talked to,
mhm,
incredibly important. Like the most
yes,
important thing you can do. I mean, like on one hand, the PR outreach, that's the only way they'll cover anything is if you have a solid story that they can talk about.
yep,
And on the flip side, you know, if you are doing ads, which obviously I like I like ads, a story will
yes,
help your ads a ton if you have a cool message to send. And that's one thing that I've had trouble with for myself is like, you know, figuring out a cool story behind a release. And I know it
mhm,
would probably make what I'm doing way more effective. And sometimes I've gotten a cool story, even if it's simple and just like this song's about this, you know, and it
mhm,
helps the ads. But like in PR or just like having fans get to like you, like everyone that I've talked to says story. It's like number one. And on YouTube, like
yeah,
on YouTube,
yeah.
everyone I've talked to for like growing your channel and stuff, they always say the most important thing you can do is have every episode have some kind of story, even if it's like an
Yep.
education video. You want there to be a narrative that pulls the person from start to the end, because like humans are just
Mhm.
susceptible to stories. You know, we all
Yeah,
love a
yeah.
good story.
That book, *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari, basically gets into that thing that if you even go back to caveman days, that everything we've been doing is story. Like that, you know, his great one is that money is just a story we've told ourselves. We say this thing is valuable. We all go, sure, this paper is worth $100, and
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
And now
Sure,
it's
but we
just
all,
a number on a
because
screen.
yeah, but because we all believe the story that this is real, we accept that it's a thing. Um, and yeah, I think that there's that interesting thing is that what you talked about with publicists is also a thing too, is that, like, you know, we all know that, you know, you bring bad music to the publicist, it's not going anywhere
Mm,
anyway. But also, like, in addition, yes, the song can be so good and no one cares about the story, they're just like, wow, that's amazing. Very rare.
yeah.
What is a reality is that a damn good story tied to a pretty good song starts a lot of careers. It doesn't sustain the career, but it starts a lot. And so I tell people all the time, I'm like, you know, like, I don't know my story. I'm like, well, you need to dedicate more time, because like honestly, the meetings I'm in, like, man, we spend a lot of time on that. And I do a lot of calls on, you know, my consulting is like, okay, let's figure out your story. And like, you know, there are some actionable questions, there's some actionable things we can do. But you know, the other problem becomes is like, maybe you haven't lived enough to have the story sometimes too, or maybe you're uncomfortable with the story because it's something that you haven't dealt with. There's all sorts of things to it. But then you can create a story, like you're talking about that Zodiac guy. That's a fucking brilliant story.
Yeah.
Figure out the
Yeah.
thing is, that's a great story. That's very eventful. It's very smart.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, I'm gonna be. It worked. I'm gonna look it up after we're done.
yeah, yeah, it's a cool idea, and a lot of prog metal bands do concept albums, and that kind of
Yes.
they're all story based, but a lot of the times a story will just be something simple about the person that makes them relatable. I've noticed, like if you look at a lot of big artists, just like, hey, I'm so and so, I make this style of music, I like this and I like this, and the I like this and this, when they say that, for example, if I said, I make future based music and I'm a mechanical engineer and I like playing video games or something, like whatever it was. If I was like, if someone got in front of it and they just liked the song subtly, if they were also an engineer that liked video games, they're gonna feel more connected to me in a way. They're like, oh, sweet, me too. And it's pretty, like, some of these things would be like, that's stupid. Like, what percent of people are gonna be into that? But even if it's 0.1% of the country, what is that, like 300,000 people?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
0.1% would be 3 million, I think.
Yeah. Math. Is there
3.9?
Well, either way,
it's astounding how bad I am at it for something I have to do all day. But
either way, it's a lot of people, whatever way you slice it, and it's enough to build a career on. Because
you are right, 390. Yes.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
But so, it's enough. It's enough to do. Yeah.
And like,
and it's also the thing.
Oh, I like one of the people that works at Indepreneur. Like, she has her own music and she's been doing well for a long time on it. Her story is that she's a female fronted rock project, and she was in the army. So a lot of people who support veterans or people who are in the military support her because of that. It's like, it's a hook. It's the thing that gets them in. And again, how many people are in that? Well, a freaking lot. A lot of people.
And it's also, it's a seed. And when I think a lot of people underestimate too with those stories is that that's just the launching pad for you. Oftentimes is that, like, if you get 3,000 of those people who are evangelizing you, telling more people, that builds the army. And as somebody who's built a following on YouTube, like, it's like that you struggle for everything, but then eventually people do the work. Like, I'm at the point, I'm about 10 months into my YouTube thing, and I'm about 8 years into my book. And it was like so funny, like with my book, I struggled to get everybody to read it, and now it's like I don't have to do anything to get people to read that book because it's so popular. It's taught in 12 universities, so people just get it when they're in school and then tell other people to get it. I needed, the work is mostly done at this point. And that is what happens with your music, is when you get that initial evangelical seed and you have to find what that story is connected, and then eventually becomes people who don't have that commonality with you, and that they're just appreciating your music.
Yeah, by the way, fantastic job growing to 3,500 subscribers on YouTube in 10 months. That is...
Oh, I appreciate that.
That is bonkers fast. Like, that usually does not happen. So, I know you have audiences elsewhere, and you probably have email lists, and you had a forum, and you got a Facebook group, but still...
It's funny. I haven't done, a lot of what I've just done is the same thing I'm talking... it's a funny thing. I had a meeting yesterday with, like, the top podcast network, and what they said, and I think this is very interesting for your listeners too, is that the only way they see podcast growth is when the hosts go on other podcasts. And they're like, we've thrown a bajillion dollars at this. Now let's think about what podcasts are. Podcasts are just personalities discussing personality. So then we take this to music. So what is the number one thing that actually gets somebody to like a song? Hearing it. That works above all else. So the first thing we engineer is, how do you get more people to hear that song? So what I find really interesting with all of this is that like most of those ways that we used to be able to do are now totally fucked. It used to be college radio was the great exploit. Like when we were talking about exploits before, and so the audience follows along, a thing that people could easily do and find that could give you amazing results for very little effort or money.
Yeah.
So, but that's, and what I would argue though, which is really interesting right now, is if you make the right music that's people still listen to on college radio, which is really just emo and indie rock, that still does work incredibly well because no one's promoting the college radio right now. And so it's incredibly cheap. So, but let's say you're doing something like your songs are much more, I guess you like to call your micro genre future based. Is that correct?
Yeah, I usually say I'm a electronic pop artist, so I can be vague.
Yeah.
I do a lot of future bass.
Yeah. Okay. Those both sound right to me of what I know the genre.
Yeah.
So the problem is like, where do you hear that? Well, because it's a really saturated market, a lot of it is in placements of things and things like that. So like, how do you get placements? Well, you need a team, you need a manager. So that's kind of out the door. But so then what are the creative exploits to get people to hear the things these days? And I think sadly that the one that does exist is the DIY playlist promotion thing, which is that you like, I'm really into that thing. Have you seen Playlist Supply?
Yeah, they're kind of just like a search engine for playlists, right?
That's correct. So
Yeah.
then you find that and you try to pitch the people through that by doing some reverse engineering, some guesswork, trying to find the community. I unfortunately think like, for a lot of saturated genres, like, the funny thing to make people understand why I think that this is like one of the only ways that I think really works is that like you now have the estimate is that you have 3 times more people making EDM than ever made rock music in the world right now.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. And so like just by nature of that, but what's interesting though is a mid-level EDM artist is bigger than like the biggest rock artist in monthly listens on Spotify.
Right, yeah. So usually I say playlist promo, and obviously there's a lot of levels of playlist promotion. I usually say it's like the lowest common denominator, like avoid it like the plague, because I see like such bad save rates, such bad repeat listen rates, like almost no follower growth. But getting playlists for free, and like I feel like that's that's free. It's like if you can't promote your music in any kind of paid fashion, you're gonna pay for it in your time because you have to find the playlist and reach out. And then the downside is, if you hit up a playlist that's not a good fit, you don't actually look at it. You get into that problem of you're getting associated with a bunch of artists that are not correct, so your recommendations get all skewed. And like for the longest time, I spent 2019 trying every playlist promotion method I could possibly find, from just emailing people or hitting them up on social media to hiring sketchy ass playlist promotion companies to using Submit Hub and Playlist Push.
Yeah. We should be clear that all playlist promotion companies are sketchy.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing, in my opinion, at least for Submit Hub and Playlist Push, is at the end of the day they're truly a pitch, and the reason why
I don't call them a playlist company, I call them a portal.
Right.
I think
right, and there are a lot of sketchy people on there. But I'm also a curator on both Submit Hub and Playlist Push.
Oh, interesting. So what do you do on there?
So people, they pay per credits to submit their songs. So on Submit Hub, they pay and they get to pick the platform, right? So they can check out my playlist and decide if they want to pitch to me. I can either accept it and add it, or I can reject it and tell them why I'm rejecting it. And so
what it is that you have playlists, not a blog.
I have playlists, Spotify playlists.
Gotcha.
And I originally grew them to I get sick of trying to send my music to playlisters, right? So I was like, I'm just going to make my own playlist. And I control the traffic. I control the songs. I know my music's going to be in there when it comes out. And then they got big, and so I kind of let people get on them. But
yeah, and this is what every label is doing, and what every label tells a band to do now. Like my girlfriend does this all day for artists. Like the big indie artists, she's texted me yesterday, like, oh, I'm doing this playlist for Guar, and and but that is the reality. Is like that's what you got to do now.
Yeah, and it doesn't get you playlists never get you that high save rate, and you don't get a lot of followers and repeat listens. But at least with the Submit Hub and the playlist push, or you owning your own playlist, you can control the whole like messed up algorithm problem. Because I've had plenty of times, like in 2019 when I was doing all that playlist stuff, I never once get any algorithmic promotion on Spotify. I never once get a fans also like section. It wasn't until I went.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and it wasn't until February or May, a couple songs into doing Facebook ads, was when I started getting like every single song would get put on a big release radar boost, and then eventually get on Discover Weekly, and then also I started getting fans also like that were pretty good, and it's at the point now where like some people I've collaborated with are showing up there, and you know like I have no way of proving what caused like each thing, but the correlation is so great to me that
I wouldn't dispute it.
Yeah.
And I've seen it firsthand, like on campaigns I've worked. And this is, you know, another thing, whether it's Facebook ads or approaching too many bad playlists, is that the fans also like just gets destroyed, and it becomes so bad and so inaccurate that it does you absolutely no favors. Whereas like, and this is yet again to go back to my community thing, like, you know, I had a night, let's say on average, I add to this, like, I have a playlist where it's just songs I like, not a full album or an artist. And let's say I add about 10 a month. I had a night I added like 30 from finally finding, it was actually these artists I was talking about before, Alden and Glaive. And then I just clicked through their fans similar. And I have this night where I find 3 times as much as I normally in a month in a single night. From that, because that was all organic plays. But what was interesting is then when I do some digging around, it's like, oh, well, they're all on this one influencer playlist, Mascarella, and then that's making the community. And this is like what I keep, and you know, like what I think is interesting when I was asking about your playlist is like having a community that's like very curated around a specific genre and really keeping that, doing those playlists. Like one of the biggest things I tell artists to do all the time is like all these people you find in your community, you should be trading playlists, you should be doing all the things where you can literally link yourselves into each other, because if you both are doing that, you're going to really do yourselves favor and bring people up. And you know, for example, I managed this band called Man Overboard about 10 years ago, and what we did a lot was we would do this thing called the podcast mixtape, and we put it on Bandcamp, and we would just get the rights to all our friends' songs, and we would just talk in between the songs a little, like it was a radio show. We'd make it in about 2 hours. But that linked all those bands together, and all those bands would tell us like, oh yeah, every show we go to, there's 10 kids who are like, we heard you through that thing, and it brought all of us up bigger, because that interlocking is the big thing. And that's what the power of playlists are right now, is that interlocking, and that fans also listen to.
Yeah, I think artist trading playlist is great, and I haven't had many opportunities to do it because not a lot of artists I know in the same niche have their own playlists like I do. But I have had one, like there's one person who submitted to me on Submit Hub, and I liked his song a lot and put it in multiple playlists. And then so I hit him up on Instagram, and I was, you know, like, hey, I see you have some playlists too. And I was like, hey, I'll add like a couple of your songs to some of mine if you'd be, you know, willing to add mine to yours. And it's been on there months later, and it's been helpful. So now for me, like, I recommend people put like small amounts of money into like Submit Hub or something and be really selectful of what they pitch to. But I think your strategy of like or I guess organic reach out, if the person has the time, you know, it's free. And if anyone replies and says like, we'll do it for a donation of $20, like tell them to go screw themselves, you know, basically.
Yes. That's just but you made a good point there that people should hear, which is that Submit Hub should not be that you wake up one day and you know, you get your Trump bucks in the mail and you go, I have $1,200 to spend on this. What you really should do is open Submit Hub and see how many things are actually worth it to do. Like if I'm sitting on this playlist, are people going to say, oh yes, this is someone similar, this is it, this is worth my time actually being on, instead of what I think most people do, which is carpet bomb the fuck out of every playlist that comes up when they type rock.
Oh yeah, I get totally so many releases that they might be technically the right genre, but the biggest reason I reject people is like, this just would not work in my playlist. Like, and not a lot of times it's not even close. It's not very often that the music's not good. It's usually like my feedback is usually something along the lines of like, the vocalist is awesome, the production's great, the mix and master's great. It's just like too soft or too heavy, or the melody doesn't fit, or it's too R&B or whatever. And yeah, a lot of bands do that, and they waste a lot of money and time. I mean, and you know, and I'm doing myself a disservice by telling people that, right? Because the more people that do that, the more like money that they send my way. But I still
that's
tell
why
people.
you're an honest man, Andrew.
And so like it's like, you know, I'd rather have artists like save their money and have like people submit their songs to me that actually have a shot on the playlist, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and you know, whether it's that playlisters club, playlist push, whatever, I think yes, it's worth it to do look down the road because you know the other thing I tell people though with the playlist and why it is important to do this is there's very few things that you could put very little effort into that could be life changing to you. And the little effort you put into figuring out how to do a really good pitch on the Spotify playlist tool inside Spotify for us is probably the 50 words that could be most life changing to you if it works out. So, like, not just do it writing, you know what it is, really, really helps. And it's the
yeah.
same thing with the Submit Hub stuff, is that there's a lot of playlists that are very influential on there that are checking things and that can do it. You just have to not do it in a dumb fucking way.
Yeah, and I feel like there is some science, maybe not science, but art in the Spotify playlist tool. I mean, you know, it's very competitive, and you should never rely on getting on a Spotify editorial playlist. Like, out of the 50 or so songs I've uploaded and pitched, I've gotten one on a Spotify editorial playlist. But it probably got me 40,000 streams, and it stayed on there for 3 months. So it was, you know,
that's good.
It was 5 minutes of effort. To kind of think about the pitch in a way. And, you know, my strategy is like talk about the message behind the song for part of it, and then talk about how you're promoting it and how you're prioritizing Spotify as the place you're sending people to the other half of it, so that like, you know, they feel like there's a benefit to them. You know, you're going to send people to the platform, which I, you know, maybe they don't care about, but I have a feeling they do.
Yes. From what I know of having friends who pitch and talk to the people is they do have a dashboard where they can see a lot of metrics. You want to hear something interesting though? I want to get this confirmed, is that apparently Spotify now ignores the pre-save.
So pre-saves don't technically exist.
Well, the save at all is not a metric, I should say. So like all the things that people do, like when people are, you still see all these artists who are like, ooh, pre-save my song, and they think that's going to get them the editorial. The editorial doesn't check that apparently.
Oh yeah, that's true, because they actually can't. Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with how the APIs like program in the pre-saves.
I don't know. I actually don't know this.
So this blew my mind when I saw it, because like a lot of people do promote those pre-save campaigns like they're gold. But the thing is,
the living shit out of me.
The way it works, so when you go to like your DistroKid Hyperfollow or like your Toned End pre-save page, when you click a pre-save, you know how it makes you like log into your Spotify account.
Yes.
It integrates with the Spotify API, which is the programming interface kind of thing, and it stores the user's like encryption codes for their username and their password. Like it logs them in, and it stores the user code, and it stores the ID of the song. And then on release day, it goes in and saves it on day one. So the save never occurs until. And actually, you on some of these platforms, you can you can pick the time. So you can say, I want all my saves to happen at 7 a.m., or I want to have some of them spread out, or I want them to happen at 10 p.m. So the fact, and I've heard people say that, like, oh, you got to get all these pre-saves so the editorial sees it. They can't see it because they haven't happened.
So this is confirming what I was told, which is that like all these people think that this is going to be the thing that makes or breaks them. And like I have a very big thing that I don't think you should promote songs very much before people can hear them. I think teasing and countdown clocks is a waste of time, because you should be using your posts and that time that you get anybody's attention by actually giving them something they can build a relationship with. And so to me, this pre-save thing is like, oh, bullet in the head, because they think it's doing, yet again, another thing like where you think you're solving a problem when you're not solving a problem at all.
Yeah. So on the note about promoting before release, like I don't do the pre-save thing. Like I've tried it, but then once I learned that, I was like, well, screw that, you know? Then what I do is like 2 weeks before the release, I'll put like a picture of the artwork, and then like a week before release, I'll put like a 20-second, 30-second sample of the song. And I might tease other things before that, like show And again, like this year has been a bad example because I've just been so busy with all the other stuff going on.
Mhm.
But that's what I've strived to do, and like put like little piece of content, like showing the production or whatever, take some pictures and tell a story about something before the song comes out. So do you think that's not really a good strategy either? Or
I'm going to be honest with you. I do not.
okay,
Because what I find is that it's so rare we can get people's attention these days. It's so hard to get people's attention. So what you have is you have all these, you know, I talk about that there's 4 levels of fans that are interested in you at any time. There's the potential fan who's never heard of you. There's the I've heard them, I guess I could hear from some of them again. There's somebody who likes what you do, and then there's a super fan. So really, you know, we're trying the super fans, they're just gonna like what you do. So the other 3 is what we are concerned with. And all 3 of those other 3, when you're posting teases, it's a lost chance to build a deeper relationship with you. So every time, let's say you actually got their attention, it was really ineffective. Whereas, like, you know, so you make a lot of electronic music. You have this cool gear in the back of you, and most people who like synth music that are musicians are modular synth nerds, or at least they aspire to be and want to learn more about it. If you do this and it's like, well, and I'm not saying you do this, but like what I do see a lot of people do is like, here's behind the scenes and me tweaking this synth. But like, whereas if you have heard that song and you think it's good and you see that, you're like, oh, I want to watch more of that. Whereas when you haven't heard that song, you're like, okay, yeah, another guy on my fucking social media who has a synth. Ooh, wow, never seen that before. So like, what I would say is like the song and the content are a circle that keeps the relationship building happening. And so like when it's post-release, so I really focus on those 2 months after. Now, do I think it's not bad to prep a fan with one post and say, hey, new music coming on Friday? Absolutely. Do the one queue up, but the countdown clocks.
Oh yeah, I really don't like when people do like daily posts and it's like day 7 and they tell I mean, like there's some that are done well where they tell a really cool story like day by day and it's related to the song and there's cool visuals, but like it's pretty. Those are more rare than the people who are just like 5 days left, 4 days left, and it's just you know.
It could all be contextualized better by doing it in a way that builds relationships with the song afterwards. And when it's out and it's able to be made relationships with, what people don't get is they're imitating Jay-Z, who's doing this. Who Jay-Z has the thing of everybody knows who he is, so he has to take all the attention to try to make people know, hey, on the first day this comes out, I'm trying to make a big splash because the most sales I'm ever going to have is the first week. There's no fucking chance in the world your first day sales are going to do anything for you. And it's what I always tell everybody. It's like, you need to be thinking about what's going to be happening in 9 to 18 months, not what's happening in 9 days.
Yeah. And on that note, have you noticed that the more traction you can get in the first like week of your song on at least on Spotify, that it seems to set the song up better long term. Like you won't necessarily get the most streams and saves on the first week, but the more you get in that first week, the more likely you are to hit algorithmic playlist or whatever down the line.
I'm sure you've seen this with browse features on your YouTube videos too. This is definitely a thing that seems to happen, is how big a splash you can make in the first few days does seem to set things up to make it a little bit easier. It seems to give some algorithmic favoritism. But what is interesting is you can have all these other events that happen that totally do that. So, example, I managed this one band, and you know, it was like that funny thing. They were putting out songs, and you know, it's all going well. The album's coming out well. You know, they're poised for things. They're about 100,000 monthlies going into it. But what's funny is, you know, you get a big feature in the middle of that really brings some new people in. It will do the tidal wave. Like you can have events that change that trajectory, but yes, you are correct that the most common story, if you don't have a trajectory changer, is going to be that however much of a splash you make the first week you do it. It's even like one of the things, like, you know, one of the things I've been telling a lot of people, if any of you are listening right now, it's like, people are like, all right, I'm gearing up to release in 2 weeks. I'm like, you know, there's going to be an election where there's going to be mass riots in the streets, most likely, for a few weeks. And I don't know if you remember during Black Lives Matter when they asked everybody to stop posting so that the police brutality would shine through, and everybody got shamed for posting. Putting out the song that you've worked on for years on November 4th, really bad idea, my dude. really
Yeah,
bad.
yeah. I mean, the whole, even just the holiday season's kind of rough, right? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, like, people are focused on different things, and especially for Facebook ads, this is like, I've been telling a lot of people I talk to in consultations when they're like planning a song, it's like end of November, end of December. I'm like, ad costs go up a lot around holiday season, you know? And
Well, here's an interesting thing too with the end of the year, and like, so there used to be a thing. I've been unfortunately in this business, or fortunately, for better or worse, since the days of like when retail was everything, and we
mm,
would never put something out from November 15th to January 23rd, and that was not just our label; that was every label, because the distributors would
yeah.
tell you they're just going to focus on all the big releases of the year. They're just going to bring it in. And what's changed now in the internet era is that people put out all these year-end lists, and everybody gets engulfed in hearing what they didn't hear all year that's going to
Oh,
happen in
right.
music fans. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you do it. I do it. It's like I'm all of a sudden I'm like, oh, well, I didn't listen to that Phoebe Bridgers record. Maybe I should give it a second try. And then the next thing I know is 30
Yeah.
days later, I've listened to nothing but that Phoebe Bridgers record, and there's
Yeah.
goes all the other new music that came out.
I've been like trying to get a song ready to launch before like Thanksgiving week so that I don't get screwed. And because like last year, what I did is I dropped an album on my birthday, and then I didn't release, which is October 25th, and I didn't
Huh.
put anything out for the rest of the year because that was kind of the strategy. Like I really don't want to touch holiday with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of like, in one, it's harder on you because you're like going to family stuff. I mean, now it's
hmm
this year's kind of weird anyway, so maybe it'll
Yeah.
change because like
Yeah.
everyone's inside and stuff so much more that maybe this will actually be better than a normal year. But
Yeah.
the
And
election's
I've made
also
it.
nuts, so who knows?
Yeah. And I've made a real interesting argument. A lot of people have been scared to put music out. I'm like, I think people are bonding with music in a way they haven't in a really, really long time, in that
Yeah.
they like, you needed, like, we were all having some of the weirdest emotions. And like, one of the funny things is, like, as you get a little older, is like you can feel a little emotionally dead inside. Everybody I know who felt that way, they're feeling pretty lively emotionally lately, because this is a fucking whirlwind of a time. And
Yeah.
like, giving people, I like, one of the things I talk about in my book on creativity in music, uh is that, like, people forget that music is what it really, I mean, one, it's an emotional connection, but two, is it's a way to change the emotion you're currently feeling to a different one,
Hmm.
or to give
Yeah.
comfort to the one you're doing. And so people need music when they're feeling new things. And people, I don't think there's a single person in America who's not felt new things since March 18th.
Right. Yeah. Totally. And some artists, like I've seen a lot in groups where people will, they were originally gonna have a song come out and they pushed it because of something that happened this year.
Yeah.
One of the multiple times we've had some kind of disaster, and then they pushed it. And on the flip side, some people have done the opposite and said, "Well, this is the time to jump on," and they put out like twice as much music as normal, and they've been growing a lot because of it. And some people have even, I don't want to say milked it, because that's
Yeah.
but like utilized it, like they've like
Exploited the open exploit,
yeah,
which is what you're supposed to do in marketing.
and like one guy that I helped with their they were doing some Facebook campaigns. He went out to like a protest, and they filmed to like the song, him like with a megaphone, and they made this like cartoon art as the cover, him as a megaphone in this big protest. And they in the ad, it was difficult to use that because of Facebook's rules against social issues, right? You can't promote any social issues, but we ended up using it, and that was their kind of strategy. Like, people are all talking about this, let's make a song that talks about this artist's perspective on it. And they went to a protest and shot footage for it. On one hand, that's kind of exploiting a sensitive topic, but on the other hand, their message was positive.
Yeah.
So it's
I think if it's authentic, it's fine. I mean,
yeah,
my big thing is that we all have become, masters of detecting authenticity, and that stuff
right.
falls flat if it's not authentic.
Yeah, I'm all for someone showing their message on their website or their email, but it gets so exhausting nowadays when you go on someone's website and they have some message at the top just so that they can say that they had that message there, and that they, like, maybe they care, but they jumped on it so late where it just feels a little weird, right? And
Yeah, well, you're detecting a lack of authenticity.
yeah,
And
and I'd almost rather they just didn't get involved, you know, just kind of stayed in the middle and just, you know, this is not what we do. We're like a shoe company or
no.
whatever, you know. We're
Yeah. One of my I do this funny podcast called Killed by Desk, and it's about musicians' life after they've been in a big band where they have a day job. And one of the host's day job is he has to write the messages from companies about like social issues.
Oh God.
just to say that he has one of the most miserable jobs I know of. It's like right next to Gravedigger.
Yeah, because you know every company does it, and it's I don't know, it's just like listening to a politician, right? It's like you know that they're a lot of times saying whatever they got to do to make people feel more confident in their platform, but
Yeah.
anyways,
so yeah, sorry, I diverted that ship there.
no, I mean I'm sure everyone's thinking about it. You know, like
Yeah.
a lot of people that I've talked to this year have been severely impacted by one of the many things we've had. You know, this year, like whether it be COVID or all the Black Lives Matter stuff happening. I'm gonna have to like bleep myself saying that because I feel like YouTube is gonna like flag me for saying social issues or whatever. But
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that they're like so honed into that right now.
they
That's
used
so
to
weird.
unmonetize videos for saying COVID. Now they stopped doing
Yeah,
that. But
I know. I one of mine where I just talk about should you release music during COVID's unmonetized.
yeah, and then I accidentally left some in one video, and they seem to be back to, you know, realizing that everyone's talking, literally everyone. It's impossible not to bring it up. I mean, it's affecting the whole world. But a lot of artists, like, I've talked to people who like, this is gonna be my biggest year ever. I had all these shows lined up, and all of a sudden, the whole year's canceled, and now they have to make this gigantic shift because a lot of these people were in person only, like shows, meeting people, shaking hands, networking with people in person. All of that just instantly stops, and they don't know what to do, right? Because and some of these people aren't very good at computers either. Like they don't do social media much, and they're kind of thrown into this position. And you know, it's probably why like my channel has grown a lot this year because literally all I talk about is growing online. I don't do the in person thing, right?
Yeah. It's literally all I do. I joke that I sit in this room. I call it the content ranch. I just say to my girlfriend, like, just another day on the content ranch. Just sat in here making podcasts and YouTubes and chatting away with people about how they make their content. Just another day.
Yeah. What is that picture behind you that we've all been looking at this whole time, by the way?
So this is the cover of my book on creativity and music. And that is my gold record for a record called from a band called Census Fail, Let It Unfold You, that I got this year.
Census Fail. I feel like I listened to them when I was a teenager.
That sounds right, because that's when you listened to them.
Yeah, I'm 28, so that...
oh, yeah. It sounds exactly right, yeah. It would be 2003 it would have come out, so...
Oh, damn. I remember this album, Still Searching. And Let It Unfold.
So this is... Yeah, Let It Unfold You is the one I worked on.
Oh, sick. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congrats. Gold record. That's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah. It's I mean, it's, you know, it's the funny thing I say about it is most of my favorite records are not gold or platinum records. So in some ways it's like... but it's nice to be like, okay, you were a part of a thing that affected a lot of people. It's a nice thing. And to be frank with you, I don't do a lot of YouTube videos in this room, but let's just say the second I did one in here, I felt like people trusted me more for some dumb reason.
Yeah. I learned an interesting thing about those records is they make you pay to send them to you.
$300.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that.
I had to just do it. Some people get very lucky and the record label buys it for everybody.
Yeah.
But the record label that put this record out does not exist anymore.
Oh, well, that's a sad story. It's
that funny thing though is like, you know, you see, because streaming has monetized back catalog. So, you know, a lot of what I did at Atlantic Warner was, you know, they had gotten the clue that now that back catalog is so monetized, make content around classic records and reignite those sales. So you're able to now do big things with that. And so you see so many of these records now going gold and platinum that never did because the thing, but you know, some of the imprints they're on sure don't exist anymore because, you know, the average indie label has the average indie label that ever gets one gold record only has a 6-year lifespan.
Huh.
Yeah,
Wow.
pretty wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot about in the label world a lot of people don't realize, and I probably only know a very tiny bit, because I learned a lot just hearing you talk about behind the scenes. But I learned that label thing. I mean that gold record thing because I recorded at a studio where the guy who owned it, like, he was one of the engineers on American Idiot by Green Day,
Oh, nice.
and
Yeah.
so we
Great
saw it.
sounding record.
Yeah, and he we saw it in the studio, and we're like, I was asking him like what'd you do in this? Like, how do you, how does this work? Like, he's just like, well, actually, they make everyone pay for it. That if you get and I was like, what? Like,
Yep.
if you got a gold is 1 million, right? Or is it?
Gold is actually 500,000. Million is platinum is 1 million.
Okay, yeah, and so it's like, man, I sold 1 million copies of this album, and they won't even give you a $300 plaque. But I guess it's whatever.
The music business is not what it used to be. The other thing I was not appreciative of is, like, I can remember I had around 1999 I had some like top 40 hits and stuff I'd worked on, and I'd go to the major labels and be like, feast upon our things, and just the treatment. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna start working at a major label, and it's like, you will get nothing. No, bring your own coffee. It really was that bad. Like, oh, you want coffee? Here's the worst coffee we found, so you will never use it. We won't have to pay for it. Oh, we'll barely clean the toilets too.
Oh wow! I mean, like, the music industry, it's one of the most competitive and also most underpaid industries out there. Like, it's you, like, almost any other career path would probably make your life easier, and it's just kind of how it is, right? I mean, like, there's a lot of money to be made, but a lot of it's not in the artist world as much as it is in like production or engineering or marketing or whatever, or publishing even. Like, there's a lot of other paths that make more money than being the artist itself. So it's a very hard world, and a lot of people don't realize it when I get messages like, this is like, releasing a song a month is just it's really hard. It's, this is what people are doing. It's a competitive industry. It's hard to break, and it's
but it is that funny thing. Is it has weeded a lot of people out, which is a good thing. I will tell you, I had a very depressing around 2008. It was like debilitating at times, dealing with how many people were just really putting no effort into being in a band and doing things and just thinking that, like, oh, well, I'm hot, and you can now auto tune and drum edit everything and it'll all work out. And I was doing these terrible pop punk bands and like having some successes with them that were like fully manufactured, and it was, record labels were signing 15-year-olds. It was like, it was really bad. And I think we're in a much better place now. And to give the hope to some people too, what's very interesting is like, so let's say Spotify started chart. I'm not saying they're going to do this, to be clear, but here's the hypothetical. Spotify moves up their price to $20, and they would never double the musician royalty rate unless we put guns to their head and threaten to burn down their offices. But if they doubled the rate for everybody, even just double, I know a lot of us talk about it should be a penny a stream, but even doubling would be such a substantive thing in the change of life for musicians who do a little well, and for how much money it would put into the music business. It would be a astronomical shift, because we have to remember, Spotify is 80% of streams for most artists. Like, you're gonna the other streaming services are about 20 if we're not counting YouTube. But if we're calling Apple Music, Tidal, Deezer, Pandora, whatever the fuck. So it would be a really, really huge difference, and the other ones would follow suit. YouTube, I'm sure, will still be the worst paying thing because God hates us. But regardless, it could really be a thing. And I think that there will also be a very interesting thing, is that there are so many people working on these blockchain things and the kind of things that there is some hope that we will see somewhat better financial benefits for musicians in the future that I think will be demanded, because I should say for the audience, my other job is I'm very knowledgeable in politics, and the one thing you see is this thing called the dialectic, which is when things get bad, the pendulum swings the other way, because they eventually get so bad that people get very angry. And I think we're about there. If my Facebook feed is any indication, we're about there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I brought this up when when you had that Daniel Ek statement where he was saying how musicians
Yeah.
need to put out more music, and
Mm-hmm.
my argument was mostly siding with him because it was like, well, this is what I've already been telling people to do, right? Like put out more music and all that.
Yes.
And my justification, everyone was saying like Spotify needs to pay artists more, and while I would love that, if just Spotify raised their prices, they would go out of business because they weren't even profitable until like 2 years ago, and they're
Yep.
not much. They're not very profitable now. Even they're like just slightly above. Although I think the 2020 is an exception. I think they've done fantastic this year. But
Here's the interesting thing though too is like when we talk about their profit, they don't split the profits properly. Like we have to remember the whole reason Spotify has spent a $500 million on podcasts is because then for somebody for 60 minutes listens to something that costs them nothing to do. Podcasts cost about $600 to produce. So like when you pay Joe Rogan $100 million and people are listening to 3.5-hour episodes instead of fucking streaming, ooh, sure works out for their profit margin, doesn't it?
yeah.
You're streaming 3.5 hours of music, they're just getting siphoned.
Oh right.
Whereas paying off Joe
Oh yeah, because
$100 million.
they don't pay podcasters anything, right?
No, I mean, like, so for example, I told you this before we were rolling, but so I produce one of the top 30 podcasts in the entire world, and we don't get a fucking dollar when Spotify plays anything.
Right. Yeah.
And apparently they're going to start putting their own ads into things, and then we're going to get some revenue shares like YouTube does, and you're going to opt in like YouTube does in the future. I'm sure that is their plan.
Yeah.
Because it'd be stupid for them to not do that. But still, an hour of programming, I mean, and that's 12 songs times, the 100 million people they have listening to music in a given month. It's a lot of fucking money.
So
they
in a way,
that, and that's why.
In a way, having more podcasts on Spotify could be a path forth to actually paying more per song, if they were willing to let go of that cash and that extra profit.
So the analysis, when you read, there's a couple of really smart people who like put out white papers about this, like major labels pay. And when I've been lucky enough to have them leaked to me, the gamble Spotify has is that at some point they're going to get pressured that musicians need a raise, whether it's by government mandate from people, just musicians unions going to the right congressman and getting this through the law, onto people being with pitchforks out their office. Whatever scenario it is, they know it's coming.
Yeah.
My money is on some congressman making it happen. There's been a lot of legislation for musicians. Congressmen love to support musicians because they're around them and they communicate with them. It is a thing that gets done. But the point being, at some point, they're going to have to pay more. Even if that is 2 times, even though I believe it should be about 100 times, it is substantially more money. Let's say it's 4 times, which I've read is the best case scenario. 4 times goes from being $30,000 a year if you're making that from music to $120,000, where you can do a lot of more interesting things and have a lot better life. Much like 1999 was the peak of compensation for musicians, and then it's all been downhill since there and pretty much flattened out in the last 3 years. It would be a really, really substantive thing. I was in the music business in 1999. I was very young then, but like it was a much different time. The budgets we get now for records on indie labels and major labels are about 1/7 to 1/10 of what they were.
Wow. So it's not just the indies that are hurting; it's also the labels that are hurting.
Oh yeah, everything is done way more lean. Just how can we get this done for as little as possible?
Jesus, I heard that Universal Music Group just made like a $100 million hotel too. And so I hear about a lot of stuff like that in the music industry where like they obviously have money, but I wonder if it's more they're taking out a debt on a gamble, because they're saying they're gonna have live music in these hotels and there's gonna be a music themed, almost like a Disney resort, but from a music company.
If you think of this way too, like what are you and I doing? We have a bunch of different things going on. You have, your Patreon, you have your other things. All the major labels are doing a very similar thing. One of the most funny things that Warner Music Group, for example, I was in charge of, I was doing podcast production. Mm-hmm. So we were moving into bringing in podcasts, doing things, making things around it, because it all circled back to promotion. If we're doing even a sports podcast or a news podcast, and we were able to advertise on the network the podcast we'd be doing. Like, we had a group, and one of the biggest a cappella groups in the world had a podcast. They put an ad on that, it lifts them up and it lifts everything up. They did a really interesting move while I was there, where they bought this website called Uprocks. So if people don't know, Uprocks is a entertainment website, but now all of a sudden they have one of the most popular websites where they could say, oh, you don't want to write that article on Ernest? No, I think you're writing that article on our artist. And now they have a bunch of tweets from a very big account and big bunch of coverage. And oh, look at that, they're on the cover. Whereas all the non-Warner music artists are on a little bit of a smaller thing, because it doesn't matter about their bottom line. It matters that they are getting more publicity for their artists, because this, we have to remember, so the thing I work for the podcast is the Daily Beast. We're one of the largest news organizations, but we are just a write-off loss for Match.com and OkCupid. And the Washington Post, the second biggest newspaper, is just a write-off loss because Amazon owns it. Like,
right,
that's
yeah,
the world we live in.
It's kind of like for like if Apple Music doesn't have to be remotely profitable because it's owned by Apple, or Amazon Music doesn't have to be profitable because it's owned by Amazon.
And you make a good point here, because Apple Music is not profitable at all. It's just that Apple knows that they need a product. Well, and Apple is the fastest company to $1 billion and $2 billion. They've doubled the thing faster than any company has ever done in the history, and they don't give a flying fuck. It is a loss that they don't care about the least bit at all, because they know they need an ecosystem to keep those other billions of dollars flowing into that fucking app store, because you got a Candy Crush.
I mean, and Spotify, their whole market cap is dropping the bucket compared to Apple. Like Apple could buy them at a moment's notice if they were for sale, and it wouldn't care. And Amazon even, probably even more so. I think, I don't know which companies. I think Amazon's significantly bigger, right?
No, well, so what's funny is Amazon is used by more people apparently, but not valued as high as Apple for some reason. I don't understand. I'm not smart enough to understand that part, but apparently I heard that on a podcast where people were smarter than me.
yeah. It's a crazy world with all this stuff. But anyways, man, we've been chatting for see, hour 42 minutes. So let's do a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll
sounds great.
We'll call it a night. So everyone in the chat, get some questions in, for both of us or just for Jesse, and yeah. I'll start scrolling up in the chat. People have been... So last night, the stream I did was my current most popular live stream ever.
Nice.
Last night. And this one just doubled it.
Wow.
So I don't know if people just really liked what you had to say and stuck around, or I'm doing really good algorithmically. One of the two.
I'm hoping you're doing great algorithmically. That's great news.
Yeah. I think we peaked at 161, which is exciting. Never had that many people in a live stream.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. But yeah, everyone, Jesse's channel is linked in the description. I mentioned it earlier, but definitely subscribe to his channel. Relatively new, only 10 months so far, but you've got like 50 videos or more. I feel like...
I have I think almost 90 now.
90,
I do 2 a week. Last week was my first one, missing it because... like I said, I work in politics right now, and I was too exhausted to make a video on Friday.
Yeah. That happens to me all the time.
Yeah, sometimes you stare down those 5 minutes and you go, well, I know that's 3 hours. And, it was the first time I swore to myself I'd make it an entire year, and then I had to make a gamble with myself of just going, buddy, you are not even seeing straight anymore. It's time to take some rest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard doing the 2 videos a week. Takes a lot more work than people expect, just being a viewer, because you got to think, like, you got to film the video, which is, if the video's 15 minutes, you probably filmed at least 20 minutes. And then
I would say even more for me. Yeah.
And like I'm at the situation where my videos are so streamlined, like I almost do them as one takes, like all the video transitions and like the screen overlays, it's all performed with like a Stream Deck. So I click in, and then
that's interesting.
So it's almost like I'm doing a live stream, but no one's watching. And then all I do is every time I make a mistake, I just cut those mistakes out. And then it's like editing time super quick. But at the end of the day, you still have to watch the whole video when you're editing it.
Yep.
So that's times 2. And then usually when you export it, you watch it again to check it. And then
Yep.
you have like end screen overlays and
Mm-hmm.
graphically, and then on YouTube, and then you have to write the description. You got to do the thumbnail. You got to do the algorithm research. You gotta hang out in the Premiere, which means you're watching the video
Mm-hmm.
a fifth time. You got to reply to comments, and so every video could be a few hours of work, at least.
Yeah, I'm about 3 to 7 is my my normal thing, and then if I'm really like I have a couple coming up that like the amount of research I've done to like kind of try to be thorough, you know, especially if I do guides to social media.
Yeah.
I've learned so much over the years that I'm like, I have to review, you know, like my book on building a fan base, I update it every single year. So I have
Yeah, I
notes
saw
back.
that, which is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, some parts of it go out of date. There's new things. You know, what's actually funny is this year has been the slowest. I'm updating it right now, and it's been the least amount of updates because COVID did not change a lot of things for people in many ways. While I think it changed the game in a big way, but what's funny is a lot of times it's like new technologies come out, all these things.
Yeah.
Things very much stayed the same this time. So that's been interesting. But the point being, I have a lot of notes on techniques I've seen. I have like I use a certain app to just like write in every technique. Like every time I see an artist do something cool, I maintain it in an app, and I have 10 years of those notes. So I'm like,
Oh, jeez.
going through every time I've seen an artist do something interesting and try to take in what I did, and then I circle the scripts to a couple of friends that work in music marketing and have them poke holes in it so that I don't sound like an idiot on camera. Yeah, and then it's time to tape after I feel they're vetted, and I don't have that live stream thing down. I like to do some post production where I make fun of myself at the end, so because I can't stand looking at myself, so I have to at least make it that I'm not taking it that seriously.
Yeah, you have a lot of funny like sound effects and zooms and stuff.
Yes.
Like I can tell you put a lot of work into the editing behind your videos, which I used to try to do at a point, and then I was like, no, just sales.
Yeah, well,
rather save the time.
You know, it's interesting. My friend Finn McKenty, who I was talking about, who has that channel Punk Rock MBA, he does experiments with these. Like, you know, all the edits and things I do doesn't affect the page views. What affects it is me saying things with momentum.
Yeah, I found people are pretty attuned to like if the information's there, like you could shoot on an iPhone and they'll be happy.
Yep.
At least
I actually I still shoot on an iPhone. I'm about to buy a camera.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean I use a Canon EOS R if you're looking for recommendations.
Well, your videos always look great.
Oh, thanks. Took me a while to figure it out. They looked like crap for like 10 years.
It's actually funny when my friend was over when I was watching your videos to make sure I was studied on what you've been discussing. He's like, "Oh, I love this guy's lighting."
Oh,
you got that compliment. Your lighting game is very strong, and he's an avid YouTuber.
Nice. Yeah, I spent like a couple months obsessing over a lot of videography channels, and so I learned about lighting,
same.
and I spent a lot of trial and error just messing with the lighting. Because I found that that's like by far the most important thing. Like if you could shoot an iPhone, you know, if you have good lighting, no one will ever notice. And I'm planning on making a video about shooting music videos on phones. 'Cause I know a lot of hip hop artists just shooting music videos on their phones, and they look great.
Filmic app.
Yeah, and so I was gonna like start off a YouTube video, and I guess this will spoil the thing, but I was gonna start off the video explaining it. But the secret will be like a few minutes into explaining it, I'll be like, and by the way, you can do this on a phone because you've been watching this whole video shot in my iPhone.
That's good. That's good.
All right, so let's see what. One question someone had earlier that I forgot to bring up. What was that playlist service you mentioned where people could like do some research?
Playlist Supply is the one. I actually made a whole video on how to do it as well. It's a great company.
Is it free?
There's been other services. It's actually not, but the other services that. So I used to use this thing called Chartmetric for it. Chartmetric is $140 a fucking month.
Yeah, they gave a 90-day free trial during COVID, which I jumped on. It was great, but not $150 a month great.
Yeah, exactly. And so my thing now is this thing does it. It's not pretty, but it gets the job done for $20 a month. So it's like that to me is very much worth it. The company's receptive. They're building improvements on it, and like what's funny is we all know so many apps don't give you the thing you want.
Yeah.
It gives you the things you want. And that's really, to me, what's important about nearly any app you're going to use. It's like, okay, I want to sort by this. Okay, it doesn't. It's just a fucking spreadsheet that they're using an API to get, and they did it well. And
I
to
think
me,
this company
they're
hit
worth
me up
$20
via email about like a couple months ago, and I think I just wrote them off as being a sketchy playlist promotion company.
The amount of times I do that and then come back, it's the same thing. You know, my other joke, like I was talking about the 1975. Every one of my favorite bands is a band that I said sucked at one point before I got it.
Yeah, so
literally without fail.
For everyone watching, if you're interested in that, I'll hit them up via email and see if they can give me like a free trial, so I can show what it does for the channel. Actually, you made a video, so did you do the same?
Yeah.
You tried it, so go to.
I made a video all of me using it and showing how I did it and everything, and it's great.
Yeah, go to Jesse's channel and look for playlist supply, and you'll find a full tutorial. I think I actually might have watched part of that video when I was scavenging your channel.
yeah.
Make sure I knew enough to maintain a good conversation about your past. By the way, your history is super dope. By the way, like all the stuff you've done, like it's like lots of cool accomplishments, and also cool like that you know, the whole kind of like transparency and like sharing all the label stuff. Like I appreciate it in this call, and I'm sure the chat's been like wild this whole thing. So I think everyone's been super interested in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there was a sad thing when I started doing this around 2009, is that like there was all this stuff, particularly like, you know, I worked at like one of the biggest mastering houses when I came up, and mastering was always the thing kept in the dark. And I would argue even in some ways still is. But it's so crazy that like how much information still gets obscured from people. And I think very intentionally, like a lot of people are so insecure. It's the same thing, like, you know, it's like the funniest thing, like the most untalented musicians are always the ones who are so concerned about copyright. It's like, dude, no one's stealing that from you. You'll talk about copyright, you'll spend more time copywriting your song than you do working on it. And like there's this funny thing of that, like there's so many people who are like, I'm never gonna have a good idea again, I'm never gonna do it, so they hide all this information. It's like you're hiding because you know that you're faking everything. I know damn well that like I'm going to, at the end of the day, no matter how much information I give out, I'm just going to keep coming up with new things. And the funny thing is, you know, like my book's been out for 8 years now in 8 editions. Everybody's like, I can't believe you gave away all that information. You got those bands so big and then you just gave it away. And I'm like, no one ever does any of it. Like the realistic thing is like, you know, there's this like trick in it about like websites and how it used to like convert people. I'd never see anybody doing it. It was like, it was literally one of those things. Like I actually had analytics and stories from fans of that probably made us 50,000 fans. The thing we did. So
wow.
It's just, the thing is you give away the secrets. It doesn't mean anybody does it. I know you're probably seeing a good amount of your students actually being actionable in this stuff. But like the funny thing is, like, I'm sure you do see, they don't do every little detail, and the devil is in those details.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people that book me for consultations. You know, there's 2 types of people, or maybe 3. Like I've had a few people where it ends up being all about like YouTube releases and social media strategies. But there are 2 general types. Or someone sees my videos, they feel like what I'm doing is valuable, but they just don't want to jump into it blindly, so they want me to kind of hold their hand through the whole setup process. The second is someone tries it on their own, and they're wondering how to make it better, or that it's like broken and it's not working. And it's usually down that group of where like things aren't working or they want to make it better. It's usually they miss some detail, or, you know, maybe it's because like, you know, the nice thing about like a course, and I don't want to like pitch my course here, but you know, it's that everything's nice and organized. When on YouTube, it's like you're putting out content, and then I don't publish the Facebook ad videos 2 times a week because I only do a new one when I have a new song that's out and my process changes. But it could be that, like, you know, my process 6 months ago is so different from then, and so people might try something from 6 months ago and everything's broken, and you know, that's the kind of the details people miss, right? The devil really is in the details.
Well, and the funny thing is, like with the course thing, is there is a real thing to that. Like, my first book, I blogged almost all of it, but it was 3,500 blog posts over the course of a
That's
few
so
years,
nuts.
and like, yeah, no one wants to read the thing
Yeah.
like that. They're like, all right, we're good. So you put it in a nice order where everybody can consume it. They're willing to pay the $30.
Yeah. Sale says Andrew Southwood with the smallest water bottle in the world. Yeah, I got a Marco Rubio water bottle here. Um, and yeah, these were the only ones I had in the house, and I grabbed them before this call because I didn't want to fill my full water bottle. Sale, or sorry, where's it? Where's his name? Oh, I scrolled past it. It was Tris. He was asking, "Where's your message, Tris?" It just got so buried. I jumped to the bottom. Is it gone forever? Man, did it get deleted? I guess I'll scroll to the next one. Vino Beats. Yes, I hate music marketers putting cookie cutter info. People don't expose / know how to do the secrets. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a, like, if you read Hypebot or Music Think Tank, it's like so funny. It's just like, it's people repeating the article, the same article somebody else wrote or in a book a few years ago, and then it gets put on YouTube by somebody reading from it that doesn't do it over and over again. And it really is a bad. I honestly, the reason I started my YouTube channel is somebody sent me a very big YouTuber who will remain nameless, just like cribbing my book pretty hard. Like, it's a concept I came up with myself, and they're reading it as if it's their own. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm finally going to do this. And it's funny because, like, all I do is watch YouTube. So I was like, why shouldn't I do this? Like, I come home at night, my girlfriend gets angry that all I want to do is watch my subscriptions.
Yeah, that must be rough when you see people like just ripping off your work.
But, I mean, it's like the thing I said is like, I know I'm going to keep coming up with good ideas.
Yeah,
and
the nice thing about the United States, and I'm sure a lot of countries have the same rule too, like the second you make something and document it, it technically is copyrighted anyways.
Yep.
The only thing actually registering your music as in a legal copyright fashion, is you can sue, I think, for extra damages on top of the whatever you could already legally sue for.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's my understanding as well.
There's essentially no I mean, like, it would make it easier if your songs were registered to like sue someone in a copyright case, but if you have proof that you made it before, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, apparently that was a lot of those Coldplay cases.
Oh, yeah. Joe Satriani sued Coldplay and someone else.
Well, the really interesting one was Chris Martin went to a show in New York of a band that had, it's the same song as the Joe Satriani one. All these different people sued for it because it was super jerk, but they're like, hey, it's documented that he went to our show and we had this song like this, and they had to pay for it.
Oh, they lost that one.
They lost is weird because they settled.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of time you are just settling to shut the person up. Like, there's that funny thing. Another interesting thing I learned at the major label is like the lawyers prep for when Bruno Mars songs come out, because there's so many lawsuits, because his whole thing is to be derivative up to the fucking literal border of when it's plagiarism.
Yeah. I saw an interview from Deadmau5 where he was talking about how, like, he noticed the more famous and like successful he became, that like the more and more he gets sued every year. And he was like, he has teams of lawyers because he just gets sued like every month or something. And he says they'll be between like music cases or between some kind of money dispute and an arrangement or a contract, and apparently that's common. That's
common. I mean, a really interesting example too is like, with some of the punk bands I've worked with. They're like, I don't want to be an LLC. And they try to do everything on their own, and then when they have to become an LLC is the first time a fan gets hurt at a show. Because you don't want to be sued individually, because that could go real bad for you.
Yeah, you'd rather lose the business than lose your house or whatever, or your whatever value you have. Like, and if LLCs are expensive to do, but like if you're in a situation where you need that legal protection, like it might make sense.
Yeah.
Or like especially if you're like Dillinger Escape Plan or something.
Yeah, some of those shows I've been to have been a little out of hand.
Yeah, their show, their guitar is like has broken his ribs
Yeah.
on stage, and oh, I found Triss's message. You guys were talking about having a story. How do you find your story, or what could it be? I'm a nurse doing this in my free time, but other than that, I'm an average Joe.
Hmm.
So, what would your advice be?
So I actually have some videos on like questions I ask people, but really a lot of the time it is like you did yours very well. It's like you know what you do for a living, you know what your interests are, but like with some other people, like it's I had a rough time in my life. I was a heroin addict. Onto you know a big story can often be like what you experience with a relationship. A lot of this is learning how to, a lot of people are like, well, I'm a bad talker. It's like, no, you haven't just done the work to learn how to be a good talker. Like one of the
Mm.
things I do go through with artists and I do in like consults a lot is like, it's like there is a story there. You're just not good at, like, I come from a family of like people who could tell a story out of like picking up a fork
Yeah.
and like, but it's funny is then we have some members of the family who can't do it at all, and it's like they do really interesting things. They just don't know how to talk about. My sister does these crazy criminal justice things, and she does not tell a story if I was in a room with Arnold Schwarzenegger like her, I'd have a 90-minute story out of the 7 minutes. She has a 1-minute story,
Yeah.
and what it is learning how to be iterative and verbose and tell that story. There's actually this book. I'm gonna fuck up the author's last name because I've done this before when I've recommended it. Uh, story by Robert McKee, where this is the book that when anybody writes a script or a movie about their life, this is the one you're supposed to read. It is one of the most popular books sold. But it has these very elemental questions that just teach you how to iterate a story better. And it's also like one of those books like I know, it's 2020. I'm somebody who's written 2 books, one of which is 750 pages. Everybody fears books. This is the type of book that if you're a slow reader and it takes you 4 hours to read, you might want to get your mental health checked because something deeper is wrong. It is a easy to read book. Like most people can read it in 2 hours.
Okay. Yeah, story by Robert McKee. McKee.
Yeah, great book.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat if anyone wants to go and go find it.
When you hear of like, oh, this person had a successful movie and but they'd never written a script before, 9 times out of 10 when you read their story, they read story by Robert McKee. That's what taught them to write a script.
I'll have to pick that up.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good book. It's one of those books that everybody should read that's in the story business.
Nice. Yeah, I was gonna pick up your book, but I didn't see it on your website. I just saw it on Amazon, and so I was like,
that's exactly where it is. But you send me your address after this, and I'll get you some. I have
cool.
some around.
Oh, nice. Yeah, because I was like, if you sell on their website, I'd rather like send you full than send it to Amazon and have them take their cut. Because especially if it's their print on demand, that cut can be kind of a big deal.
So here's an interesting bad thing about being an author is that you almost don't want to sell on your own because Amazon's algorithm is all about sales. It's not about the reviews and all the other things. It's about sales volume. So like one of the reasons I don't sell directly, I mean, I do have a direct portal for people for some things. Like people want very weird versions of the ebook.
Okay.
And I have a direct portal for those things, but you want to actually sell on Amazon as much as possible. Like my Get More Fans book is in the algorithm, whereas my book on creativity is not in the algorithm. And the amount it makes it, I mean, it's insane to see how much I can sell of that because of that. And it works really well. It's a very nice thing in my life that this thing I did the majority of work on 8 years ago still pays my rent every month of my life.
Yeah, that's cool. I've been working on a small kind of like book in the background, but it's not going to be like a paper full blown 750 page book. It's going to be like a 50 pager that goes for free with my course or something like that.
Yeah, that's the way to the real advice I give everybody, because everybody's like, when are you writing another book? Especially like like my last one, while it hasn't sold as many copies as the other one, it's like when people like it, they love it. And they're like, when are you doing another one like that? And I'm like, that's what the YouTube channel's for, because people don't read fucking books.
Yeah.
And never mind, they don't read 700-page books. And the reality is this is the format people like to get information in, and is now video and podcasts. That is really the way people digest long form information, and so
Yeah. And
gotta
audiobooks
go.
too, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. The audiobook of my second book does way better than the printed version.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the last 5 books I've read, I think they've all
Yeah.
been audiobooks, and because it's like, you're going for a 30-minute drive. Well, you can listen to a book. It's not like you have to dedicate a certain amount of time. It's just like time that would have been otherwise wasted. Um,
Yep.
so it's nice.
No, I love an audiobook for a long drive.
Let's see if we got any questions. Someone said, but still, share where you can find his books. So Amazon. I'll drop a
Yes.
link in the. Well, I was gonna go to your website and grab, but I'm sure if I just go to Amazon and type in "get more fans,"
Yeah, or you write
Yep.
my name in.
it's the first result.
Yep.
All right, I'll drop that link for his book in the chat if anyone's interested. It's got 241 ratings with a almost perfect 5-star score. I'm sure the
Yeah.
1-star reviews are bots or
If you're-
jerks. Yeah.
You want to actually? This is an interesting thing. Is that one of the 1-star reviews was very right, and I fixed it in later versions. But the person's never written a review since then, and it's been about 4 years, so I can't get it revoked. But I even wrote to them under the thing. I'm like, hey, this was good feedback. I actually, what the feedback was interesting is it led to the YouTube channel as well. Is you don't have enough information on what to do from going from 0 to 10,000 fans. So I was like, oh, I could write that. I actually have done that a lot. And so the last bonus section of the book is that, and then that's what my YouTube channel is mostly about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even outside of making information available on like YouTube, like essentially a course is just like it's a bunch of organized YouTube videos. It's like a video book in a way, right?
Yep.
Except you can be more interactive. I mean, some knowledge is better transferred in text, but like for like what you're doing, if you were going to work another book, it'd almost be more valuable to you to make a series of 20 to 30 videos and sell it for the price of a book,
Yeah, and truthfully, it's somewhat on the way in that form.
Yeah. Christopher Carter Burtz. I've got a question up above. Have you ever seen this with other? Oh, here we go. Something I've always wondered. I get better results from advertising on Facebook compared to Instagram. I've always thought it was the psychology of the different users. Have you ever seen this with other artists? So you're saying Facebook ads are performing better than, Facebook ads on Instagram. Yeah, that can totally be the case. It kind of depends. At least my answer is it totally depends where your demographic is. If
yes, so our answer is the same.
Yeah, like if the Facebook demographic tends to be on average a little bit older, and the Instagram average tends to be a little younger. And different types of people like Instagram and different types of people like Facebook. And I would say, like, if you're doing, just a guess, right? If you're doing rock or country or jazz or something, I feel like you'll probably end up getting better results from Facebook. And if you're doing a younger, like hip hop or something, then it might be Instagram. But also the story platforms are probably the youngest. But even myself, sometimes it switches between songs, that whatever the cheapest placement will be. But that's my answer.
Our answers are nearly identical, and it's also the thing that they see overwhelmingly rock does better. Like when I've ever sat down with people who do advertising at big labels, or rock does better on Facebook, and like more electronic genres do better on Instagram, which also skews with the age, of course. But here's a question for you, Andrew. Do you buy things from Facebook and Instagram ads regularly? And if so, what are they?
Regularly, that's hard to say, but I have a few times. I've definitely gotten some sample packs and contact libraries and plugin sales and stuff. And a couple times I actually have found like awesome music projects from Facebook ads, but only twice. And I've talked about this a lot because like, you kind of imagine like who are the people clicking on these ads and listening to your music and like, following you on Instagram and stuff. And some people are more likely to click ads, and some people just hate ads on Instagram and Facebook, and won't click them out of principle, or they might turn off user information so there's no targeting.
Yeah.
But I found a few music projects, and one of them, oh man, they were like very related to Breaking Benjamin, but they were a different band. I forget what they're called, but I liked them a lot for like a year. And then Nothing More was promoting something.
Oh yeah, I know them. Yeah.
They were promoting their new album on Facebook ads, and that's how I found them too. And I loved them. And
I met one of those guys in a liquor store one time, ironically, because I was discussing music with my friend, and he decided that he's like, "You guys are having a much better conversation than my friends. You want to hang out?"
Yeah. do you buy anything on Facebook ads or Instagram ads?
So this is the funny thing is like, I think I broke the algorithm for me that I actually do never get any music ads.
Oh.
It is so rare that I see a musician's ad on there. But yeah, I buy like spicy mayonnaise. But like, here's the correlation I find. I buy products that don't exist in any form. There's no competition. So for example, like this spicy mayonnaise I bought, it's a particular hot sauce type with a particular mayonnaise, and they say like, oh, like this. I'm like, oh, I've always wanted that. I'm going to get that. Or it's a particular piece of technology that like, I'm like, oh, I need that. Like, so for example, I bought, do you ever use text expanders?
Text expanders? No.
Okay. So what they basically are is you can program. So I can hit semicolon LP, and it'll put out a common email I write to people all the time.
Oh, okay.
It saves a ton of time. So I saw a competitor to the one I already used, and I don't like the one I already used. So I buy that one. Then I didn't like that one either. Thankfully, my text expander, the one that's actually just called text expander, updated and it got good. But I buy things that what I tend to find is there's no competition. There's no real alternative. But like, I am now aware of something that I've always wanted, but somebody has now made me aware that it exists.
Right.
That's what I tend to buy. But what's funny is and that's another reason like I'm not always hot on Facebook ads is that is the opposite of music. Is like, it'd be pretty impossible, like borrowing somebody doing an ad that says, this is the group that sounds like the 1975 Mew and Blur, your 3 favorite bands of all time, Jesse. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, for me, I guess a lot of the stuff I buy probably is original. Like, I mean, one thing I bought, I think, was a company that you'd answer a questionnaire and they'd send you like 2 different types of cologne for like work and for afternoon. And it was like kind of cool, and it was relatively cheap, so I got it. But then I feel like, you know, with the plugins and the sample packs and stuff, like some of that is actually relatively generic. It's just more of them like making me aware of a sale, I guess. That's probably one of the most often things I'll get and buy, like. And sometimes it's big companies obviously doing retargeting, like Native Instruments or something, you know. Hey, we're running 30% off, or and Ghost Hack and Cymatics are 2 big ones that I get a lot. But yeah, I don't get too many music ads myself, and I don't. Yeah. I know people who have said that once they started getting into running music ads, that all of a sudden all of their ads are from other artists. And I don't know,
I've heard the same.
Maybe it's like they interacted with their ads like accidentally or something, and then it like trips something where all of a sudden they're getting all these recommendations, or maybe those people are the types of people that are the people that click on these music ads. Like, I don't know, but it's kind of funny how the algorithm works, I guess.
Yes.
Let's see. Jamesio, I think it's actually pronounced different. You corrected me once and I don't remember. Jamesio? I think you corrected me. I don't remember the correction though. Sorry if the question was already asked. I just joined the stream. Basically, I'm curious on the issue of why the other 73% don't click. My guess is that they don't open the landing page and don't use a DSP. I don't know what that means. Oh, you put a thing up above. Oh, your conversion rate from visits on the page to actual clicks is only 33%. That's actually normal.
Yeah.
To send someone to a landing page. I mean, 33% is a little low. Usually I see 50% of people drop off from the landing page to clicking. And then you'll also see, and that's your conversion, right, when they're clicking. You will also see typically a 50% drop off in people that click and then end up as actual listeners, typically. But sometimes it's better and sometimes it's worse. So your numbers aren't too far off. Your conversion rate's a little bit low from the page, but I wouldn't panic too much. But yeah, awesome. All right, so that's it with the questions. We'll chat for a couple minutes after I end the stream, but thanks everyone who's been hanging out in the chat. This has been awesome. All 95 of you still hanging out. This video is going to be available on my Patreon. It's going to get unlisted, or maybe I'll just turn this one into a video that goes live tonight. Maybe then because it's already doing so well. We already got 3,300 playbacks, man. It's popping. Maybe I'll just release it, leave it public. But either way, thanks everyone for hanging out. This is a great time, and thanks. Go check out Jesse's, not just his YouTube channel, which is linked in the description, but also go check out his book, see if it's interested. It looks great, and I'll let you know later once I read it myself, but I'm sure it's great. And also go to his website where you have a list of like podcasts you've done, a list of like all your other various accolades and services.
My 3 million jobs, as I like to say.
Yeah, your website is just like a big list of like a million things that you do, and it's cool. But it's just jessecannon.com, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
No I.
No. Oh yeah, just JSSE.
No. That's the mistake people make.
Anything you want to tell people, Jesse, before we end the stream?
No, I'm really psyched. What I said to my girlfriend about this was, it's always an awesome thing to connect with somebody that you're watching on YouTube, and she's like, "Okay, nerd, are you 22 years old?" And I'm like, "Look, I've watched your videos forever. It's awesome to chat with you. I always figured you were a good guy. I've had a great time chatting, and it's been really cool."
Thanks, man. I've had a great time too. Yeah, I love connecting with other YouTubers, and it's always cool when like I watch their stuff and then get to chat with them. It's like surreal, because like you feel like you know them, but then they don't know you yet, and it's fun. But anyways, thanks everyone for hanging out. Yeah, have a great night, everyone. End stream. And